Close your eyes and imagine this. The story you were told about human history is not the whole story. The neat linear tale of tribes mastering fire, settling into villages, then cities and finally nations is only a surface layer. Beneath it lies something stranger, older, and far more unsettling. The whispers begin in silence, carried through fragments of ancient memory. They come from broken tablets buried in the sands of Mesopotamia, from manuscripts hidden in desert caves for millennia, from myths sung in the firelight of forgotten tribes. And in these whispers there is a pattern, one too consistent to dismiss. They speak of beings who are not entirely human, of watchers who descended from the skies, of gods who walked among mortals, of giants who strode across the earth until a great flood swept them away. Were these simply metaphors, meant to teach lessons through the language of symbol? Or were they records of real encounters, moments when humanity brushed against forces beyond our comprehension? If they were only myths, why do they appear in so many places at once? Why does the same story echo in the Sumerian epics, in the Hebrew scriptures, in the sagas of Greece and the Norsemen, in the songs of the Maya, and in the chants of the Dogon people of Africa? Why do cultures separated by oceans and centuries recall the same motifs? Giants, floods, gods descending from the sky, forbidden unions between mortals and the divine. It is as though humanity carries within it a memory too ancient to forget, too disturbing to fully acknowledge. And yet, official history is silent. Our textbooks speak of slow, steady progress. Hunter-gatherers developing tools, agriculture emerging in fertile valleys, empires rising through ingenuity and chance. It is a comforting story, predictable, rational, safe. But what if this linear line is an illusion? What if, long before Egypt raised its pyramids and Mesopotamia built its ziggurats, another story had already unfolded? A story that lingers only as whispers, half-remembered myths, half-erased scriptures, and ruins that refuse to be explained away. The fragile line between myth and memory. Think of the myths we were told to treat as fantasy. The gods of Olympus, fighting wars that shook the heavens. The titans buried beneath mountains. The Nephilim, towering figures so large that ordinary men felt like grasshoppers before them. The shining ones of Egypt who came in the first time before the age of pharaohs. All of these tales seem extravagant, impossible. And yet, what if they are distorted memories of something real? Memories preserved in the only way our ancestors knew how, through story, song, and symbol. To dismiss them is easy. To consider them seriously is dangerous, for it threatens the foundations of everything we believe about ourselves. If humanity was shaped not only by evolution, but by contact with beings outside the human story, then who are we really? Children of the earth alone, or heirs to something greater, stranger and more ancient? Fragments beneath the silence. The whispers are not random. They surface in strange places. In the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered by chance in a barren cave in 1946. In the Book of Enoch, a text once revered by early Christians, then banned, buried, and forgotten for centuries. In the epic poems of Sumer, written in wedge-shaped cuneiform on clay tablets older than the pyramids. In Norse sagas of frost giants, Irish legends of monstrous Fomorians, and Native American tales of red-haired warriors who lived in caves. Each fragment by itself can be explained away. Together they form a chorus. They tell us there was once a time before the time we know, a time when boundaries were broken between heaven and earth, gods and mortals, men and giants. A time that ended not in triumph, but in catastrophe. The Great Erasure. Perhaps the most haunting question is not what these stories say, but why they were silenced. Why did the Book of Enoch vanish from the biblical canon? Why do tales of giants resurface again and again, only to be dismissed as exaggerations or folklore? Why do accounts of colossal skeletons discovered in the 19th century fade into obscurity, locked away in museum basements or forgotten in dusty archives? Was the truth too unbelievable? Or was it deliberately hidden, erased to preserve order, to protect power, to keep humanity within the safe bounds of a carefully drawn narrative? For if the whispers are true, then our history is not what we think. We are not the first civilization to walk this earth. We are not the only beings who shaped its destiny. We are the survivors of a cycle of knowledge granted, knowledge abused, and knowledge swept away in flood and fire. The invitation, and so we begin a journey, not into fairy tales, but into echoes, into the places where myth and memory dissolve into one another. We will walk among the ruins of Baalbek, where stones heavier than modern cranes could lift lie precisely placed. We will enter the darkness of ancient texts, where watchers descend from the sky and giants consume the harvest of mankind. We will follow the trail of floods that washed across continents, carrying away not only people, but entire chapters of forgotten history. This is not a bedtime story, though it may lull you with its rhythm. It is a mirror held up to the past, showing us that what we call history may be only a shadow of something far older. And so, as night deepens and your eyes grow heavy, let the whispers draw near. Let them remind you that the earth remembers more than we do, that beneath the silence of deserts, mountains and seas, truths lie waiting. This is the story of humanity's forgotten origin, a story of gods and giants, of floods and fire, of knowledge hidden and revealed, a story not of what we were told, but of what we may have always been. High above the barren cliffs of the Dead Sea, the desert wind whispers through caves carved by time itself. It was here, in 1946, that a group of Bedouin shepherds stumbled upon something extraordinary. They were not searching for history, only a lost goat, yet what they found inside a dark cave was a treasure older than empires, jars filled with brittle scrolls resting untouched for nearly 2,000 years. This discovery would come to be known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. To scholars, they were priceless fragments of the past, hymns, religious texts, prophecies, rules of ancient sects. But hidden among them was something stranger, something that should not have survived at all. A text long forgotten in the West, yet preserved in whispers by the Ethiopian Church. A book spoken of by early Christians, quoted by church fathers, then suddenly erased from the canon of Scripture, the Book of Enoch. A forgotten testament. In the Bible, Enoch appears only briefly. Genesis gives him a passing mention. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him. A man who did not die, but was carried into heaven. That is all. But in the Book of Enoch he is no shadow. He becomes the central figure of a vast and unsettling vision. Here, Enoch is the messenger between heaven and earth, the witness of divine secrets, the chronicler of beings who should not exist. The text unfolds not as parable, but as testimony. It describes rivers, mountains, stars, and the farthest edges of the cosmos with the detail of one who has seen them. It speaks of heavenly journeys, visions of fire and crystal, of halls that gleam with light, of angels both radiant and terrifying. But woven through its verses is a tale darker than any allegory. It is the story of the Watchers. The Watchers. According to Enoch, the Watchers were angels, sent from heaven to observe humanity. They were meant to remain apart, to watch but not interfere. Yet on the slopes of Mount Hermon, they swore an oath, 200 of them bound together in defiance. They descended to earth and walked among mortals. And they did not come empty-handed. They taught humanity secrets not meant for their time, the forging of weapons, the crafting of ornaments, the reading of the stars, the use of enchantments and cosmetics. They revealed mysteries of heaven and earth, knowledge that elevated but also corrupted. More than this, they took wives from the daughters of men. From these unions came children unlike either parent, giants, the Nephilim, towering beings of immense strength and appetite. Enoch describes their presence with chilling detail. They devoured the harvest of men until famine spread across the land. They consumed livestock, then turned to darker hungers, devouring even human flesh. Violence filled the earth, and the cries of humanity rose to heaven. The Watchers had broken a boundary that was never meant to be crossed, and for this, judgment would come. The Great Flood reimagined. In the Book of Enoch, the flood of Noah is not just a story of human corruption. It is the cosmic punishment for the sin of the Watchers and the violence of their offspring. The angels who fell are bound in chains, imprisoned in darkness beneath the earth. Their children, the Nephilim, are doomed to perish in the waters that sweep across continents. The flood becomes less a natural catastrophe and more an act of divine erasure, a cleansing of a world infected by forbidden unions and dangerous knowledge. And yet, even in this devastation, Enoch himself is spared. He does not die, nor does he drown. Instead, he is lifted away, taken in a fiery chariot into the heavens, his knowledge preserved, his testimony written then hidden as if waiting for another age to rediscover it. Erased from history, for centuries the Book of Enoch was read alongside other scriptures, Early Christian writers like Tertullian and Clement of Alexandria quoted it freely. Some even considered it sacred. But when the canon of the Bible was finally decided, Enoch vanished. Why? Perhaps because it painted a vision too unsettling. Angels not as pure messengers, but as rebels who mingled with mortals. Giants who walked the earth not as symbols, but as flesh and blood. Knowledge given to mankind not as a slow progression, but as a sudden leap, torn from the heavens. To accept Enoch was to accept that humanity was not alone in shaping its destiny, that we were not the sole architects of civilization, that our story began with intervention, and so it was easier to forget, easier to silence, easier to erase. Echoes across cultures, but the memory did not disappear. For when we look across the myths of the world, we find the same story told again and again in different tongues. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth, who taught agriculture, astronomy, kingship. The Greeks told of gods who descended to love mortals, producing demigods of great power. The Irish spoke of the Fomorians, monstrous giants who ruled before being cast into the sea. The Norse remembered the Jötnar, frost giants older than the gods themselves. Even Native American tribes recalled races of towering men who once walked the plains. Could all of these cultures, separated by oceans, invent the same theme? Or were they all remembering the same event, refracted through the lens of language and landscape? Giants in the flesh. Even explorers of later ages recorded tales of giants. Marco Polo spoke of enormous men in Zanzibar. In Patagonia, Magellan's chronicler described people so tall that Europeans barely reached their waist. In Ireland, the basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway were said to be built by a titan named Finn McCool. Archaeology, too, holds its puzzles. Empty sarcophagi in Egypt large enough to hold beings several meters tall. Stone blocks in Siberia weighing thousands of tons resting atop mountains. The trilithons of Baalbek, larger than any stone we move today. The traditions are consistent. When ancient people looked upon such works, they did not credit themselves. They said instead, the giants built these. Enoch's legacy. The Book of Enoch does more than describe giants. It places humanity in the middle of a cosmic drama, between heaven and earth, between divine knowledge and forbidden power. It suggests that we are not the first to walk this world with intelligence and strength, that before us were beings larger, older, stranger, whose memory lingers in myth and stone. For centuries this book was hidden, suppressed, forgotten, until chance brought it back to light in a desert cave above the Dead Sea. Perhaps this too is part of the cycle. Knowledge given, knowledge lost, knowledge rediscovered when humanity is ready to hear its whispers again. A question that remains: what are we to do with this? Dismiss it as fantasy, the product of a fevered imagination, or consider the possibility that our past is far stranger than we allow ourselves to believe. The Book of Enoch does not demand blind faith. It asks only that we wonder, that we look at the myths of giants and gods, not as separate curiosities, but as fragments of one larger story, a story of origins erased and rewritten. And as night falls, and your thoughts drift between waking and dream, imagine this, that the world you know is only the latest chapter, that long before our history began, another history ended, a world of watchers and Nephilim, of knowledge too dangerous to endure. Was it only myth? Or was it memory, buried in stone and scripture, waiting for us to remember? Water has always been a paradox to humankind. It gives life, sustains crops, fills rivers, quenches thirst, but it also destroys, swallowing entire landscapes in a single surge. Across every culture, from the banks of the Tigris to the shores of the Pacific, there lingers the same haunting memory. A flood so vast, so violent, that it marked the boundary between one world and the next. The Great Flood is not only a story of rain and rising seas, it is the dividing line between myth and history, between gods and men, between a forgotten age and the one we live in now. The universality of the flood. Open any ancient text and the water is there. In the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim is warned of a coming deluge. He builds a massive boat, saves his family and animals, and survives as the world drowns. In Babylon, Atrahasis hears the same warning from the god Enki, defying the will of the divine assembly to preserve life. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah is chosen to build the ark, carrying pairs of creatures while the heavens open and the earth is swept clean. In India, the god Vishnu warns Manu of a flood, guiding him with the help of a great fish. In Greek myth, Deucalion and Pyrrha cast stones behind them after the flood, stones that transform into men and women, repopulating the earth. Even in the Americas, from the Maya to the Hopi, there are tales of waters that rose, destroying earlier ages of humanity. The story repeats. Not just once, not in one culture, but everywhere. Too many times to be coincidence. Too consistent to be dismissed as allegory alone. The geological memory. Science too whispers its agreement. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, glaciers melted on a scale almost unimaginable. Entire ice sheets covering continents dissolved into torrents, raising sea levels hundreds of feet. Coastlines vanished, fertile valleys became seabeds, islands disappeared beneath the waves. The Black Sea offers one striking example. Geological studies suggest that around 7,500 years ago, the rising Mediterranean broke through the Bosphorus, crashing into a vast freshwater lake. The force was equivalent to 200 Niagara Falls roaring day after day, drowning villages in an instant. Further east, sediment layers in Mesopotamia reveal thick deposits of flood-borne mud, separating strata of human habitation. Beneath one layer, evidence of thriving settlements. Above it, silence. In North America, glacial lakes burst their icy walls, unleashing torrents that scoured the land and carved valleys in days. It seems the earth itself carries scars of a deluge. More than nature, but the flood myths rarely speak of melting ice or shifting seas. They speak of punishment. Why would a natural disaster be remembered not as chance, but as judgment? The Book of Enoch provides one answer. The flood was not merely about humanity's corruption, but about cleansing the world of the Nephilim, the hybrid offspring of angels and mortals. Their appetites had devoured the land. Their violence had spread like wildfire. The world, it seemed, could no longer contain them. The gods or angels who'd permitted their existence sought to erase them, to wash away the corruption of forbidden unions and reset creation itself. This interpretation echoes elsewhere. In Greek myth, Zeus sends the flood to punish human arrogance. In Hindu tradition, Vishnu intervenes to protect Manu, but only after humanity had fallen into chaos. In Mesoamerican myths, gods drown earlier races, men of wood, giants of an earlier sun, so that new humanity could be formed. Again and again, the deluge is framed not as random, but as intentional. A line drawn by higher powers, a reset. The survivors. What is perhaps most striking in all these stories is not the destruction, but the survival. Always there is one man, one family, sometimes guided by a god, sometimes warned by a whisper. They build a vessel, climb a mountain, or take refuge in a cave. They carry seeds, animals, or sacred knowledge. And when the waters recede, they become the bridge between two worlds. Utnapishtim, Atrahasis, Noah, Manu, Deucalion. Different names, same role, the survivor, the remnant, the chosen. It is as though humanity cannot imagine complete annihilation. There must always be one who lives to begin again, and more importantly, one who remembers what came before. The knowledge that endured. In many traditions, the flood does not erase everything. Fragments of knowledge are preserved, carried into the new age. The Sumerian Apkallu, 7 sages cloaked in wings or fish skins, emerge after the deluge, teaching writing, agriculture, and ritual once more. In India, the Saptarishi, 7 wise men survive the flood of Manu, transmitting the sacred hymns of the Vedas. In Egypt, after the waters of the first time, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, restores order, bringing law and writing. In Mesoamerica, Viracocha strides across the Andes after the waters recede, teaching humanity to build and farm before vanishing into the sea. Why do so many cultures insist that knowledge was preserved, that wisdom was not entirely lost? Could it be that survivors carried fragments of an older civilization, passing them on in the only ways they could? Flooders cycle. Perhaps the most haunting element is the sense of recurrence. The flood is not described as an accident, but as part of a cycle. Knowledge given, knowledge abused, catastrophe, survival, rebirth. The Mesopotamian king lists reflect this rhythm. Reigns of impossible length before the flood, shorter reigns after. The Hebrew Bible echoes it. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. Even after the waters, shadows of the old world remained. To many traditions, the flood was not the first and would not be the last. In Hindu cosmology, time itself is cyclical, with each age ending in dissolution before another begins. In Norse myth, Ragnarok ends the world in fire and flood, only for a new Earth to rise from the sea. The Mayan calendar too speaks of successive suns, each destroyed in turn. If history is cyclical, then the flood is not a unique event. It is a reminder that worlds can end and new ones can begin. Stones that remember. Even when memory fades, stone remembers. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, 12,000 years old, older than cities, older than writing, stand as silent witnesses. Carved pillars, arranged in circles, adorned with animals and symbols, aligned to the stars. Archaeologists say hunter-gatherers built it. Yet the sophistication is baffling. It is as though the builders carried knowledge not of their age, but of one before. And then, strangely, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Why? To preserve it from a coming disaster? To hide it from those who would misuse it? Puma Punku in Bolivia tells a similar story. Stones cut with precision no copper tool should achieve. Blocks so massive they defy explanation. The local myths are clear. It was built by Viracocha after the flood. The Great Pyramid of Giza rises in echo, aligned to the stars, proportions encoding mathematics we claim were discovered millennia later. Arab chroniclers once said it was Enoch, called Idris in their tradition, who built it, preserving wisdom from the flood. Perhaps these monuments are not just tombs or temples, but time capsules, anchors of memory designed to outlast water and fire, carrying fragments of a world erased. A threshold between worlds. To stand before these ruins, to read the flood myths of every land, is to feel a strange unease. The flood was not only a disaster, it was a threshold. Before it, a world of giants, gods, and forbidden knowledge. After it, the age of men. One side belongs to myth, the other to history, and in the waters between, the line between them dissolves. The flood is a veil drawn across memory. Behind it, we glimpse only fragments. Nephilim devouring harvests, sages cloaked in scales, gods walking among mortals. Before it, reigns of impossible length, monuments that seem too advanced. After it, silence, then the slow dawn of new civilizations. But perhaps it is not silence. Perhaps it is a whisper, faint but persistent. A whisper that tells us our story began not at the flood but before it. That we are the children of survivors, heirs to fragments of a lost world. The echo in us. When we dream of apocalypse, when we tell tales of world-ending fire, flood or storm, we are echoing something older, something carried in our blood. The flood is more than myth. It is memory, etched so deeply into the human spirit that we retell it endlessly, across languages and landscapes, across oceans and centuries, and perhaps, in some way, we are still waiting for it. Waiting for the next great reset, the next judgment, the next cycle to sweep the slate clean. For if history is not a line but a circle, then the flood is not past, it is a warning. Night falls across the earth, and in the silence between the stars a question lingers. Were there giants once? Not the playful giants of fairy tales, not the friendly figures of children's stories, but beings of vast stature and strength, who walked upon the land before our time. The memory of them is scattered across cultures like broken shards of the same mirror. Each shard shows a fragment, distorted, refracted, but recognizably part of a greater whole. When we gather these fragments together, a pattern emerges, one too haunting to ignore. The Nephilim of Enoch and Genesis. The Hebrew Bible offers only a cryptic line. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. It is a verse so brief, so mysterious, that entire libraries of speculation have grown around it. The Book of Enoch fills in the silence. The watchers who descended to earth, the forbidden unions, and the children born from them, the Nephilim. They were said to be massive, their heads crowned with flame, their appetite insatiable. They consumed the harvests of mankind, devoured flocks and herds, and when nothing remained, they turned against humans themselves. Their presence was described not as blessing, but as a distortion of the natural order. In the story, their destruction becomes necessary, even merciful. The flood is less about humanity's corruption than about wiping away these hybrid beings who did not belong. But the memory does not end with the flood. Later texts mention the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Zamzumim, tribes of formidable stature encountered by the Israelites in Canaan. Goliath of Gath, clad in armour heavier than most men could lift, becomes the most famous survivor of this line. His defeat at the hands of David is remembered as the triumph of humanity against what remained of the ancient giants, Titans, Jotnar and Fomorians. In Greece, the giants take on another form, the Titans, children of heaven and earth. Their war with the Olympians shakes the cosmos itself. When they are defeated, Zeus hurls them into Tartarus, a prison deep beneath the earth. Volcanoes and earthquakes, the myths say, are the restless stirrings of their buried bodies. In the sagas of the Norse, the Jotnar or frost giants existed before the gods themselves. From the corpse of the primordial giant Ymir, the world was formed, his blood becoming rivers, his bones mountains, his skull the dome of the sky. Yet the Jotnar did not vanish. They continued to dwell in Jotunheim, warring endlessly with the gods of Asgard. At the end of time, in the flames of Ragnarok, gods and giants alike would meet once more in battle. Ireland's myths speak of the Fomorians, sea-born giants, monstrous and deformed. They demanded tribute from the people of the Tuatha De Danann until a great battle drove them into the sea. The basalt columns of the giant's causeway are said to be the work of the giant Finn McCool, who sought to build a bridge across the sea to challenge his Scottish rival. The stories differ in detail, but the essence remains. A race of immense beings, older than men, stronger than men, cast down in violence yet never fully forgotten. Giants of the New World. Even across the oceans, the memory persists. Among the Pawnee and Sioux of North America, there are tales of tall, red-haired warriors who once lived in caves. They were said to be fierce, cannibalistic, and finally hunted down by the tribes until none remained. Early Spanish conquistadors in Mexico were shown femurs so large they were said to belong to a vanished race of giants. In the Andes, the Inca spoke of giants who arrived on their shores, consuming everything in their path until the god Viracocha destroyed them with fire from heaven. Among the Maya and Aztec, earlier suns or ages of the world were said to have been inhabited by giants, each wiped out in cataclysm before the current age of humankind. From Patagonia, Magellan's chronicler Antonio Pigafetta described encounters with men so tall that Europeans barely reached their waist. In the far north, Norse explorers told of Skraelings, strange, tall inhabitants of the new lands they stumbled upon. Everywhere the explorers went, they seemed to find echoes of the same idea, that once, long ago, giants ruled the earth. Archaeology's puzzles. Skeptics argue that these are exaggerations, misunderstandings, or metaphors, yet archaeology offers its own riddles. In Egypt's desert necropolis of Saqqara, massive granite sarcophagi lie buried, boxes so large that they could hold beings several meters tall. Their lids weigh dozens of tons. Officially, they were built to hold bulls sacred to the god Apis, yet many lie empty, their size unsettling in its suggestion. In Lebanon, the trelithons of Baalbek rest at the base of an ancient platform, stones weighing over 1,000 tons each. Even modern cranes would struggle to move them. Local traditions insist they were the work of giants. In Siberia, atop remote mountains, colossal granite blocks lie scattered, some weighing thousands of tons. Who moved them? Why place them there? In South America, at Puma Punku, massive blocks of andesite are cut with such precision that even today, a razor blade cannot slip between their joints. Their intricate angles and drilled holes suggest tools far beyond hammer and chisel. The local myth is simple. They were built by giants before the flood. The vanishing bones. And then there are the bones. In the 19th century, American newspapers were filled with reports of giant skeletons unearthed from burial mounds across the Midwest. Skulls of unusual size, femurs longer than an ordinary man, entire skeletons measuring 8, 10, sometimes 12 feet tall. Yet again and again the remains vanished, spirited away into private collections, dismissed as hoaxes, or quietly locked away in museum basements. Similar reports echo elsewhere. In the deserts of Egypt, explorers claim to find skeletal remains of beings far taller than ordinary men. In the Tarim Basin of China, mummified bodies with red hair and towering stature were uncovered, their origin still debated. In the Pacific Islands, legends of Kanya-Kapupu, giants who once strode across the land, were matched with oral accounts of large bones unearthed in caves. Are all these simply mistakes? Misidentified fossils of animals, exaggerated stories repeated until they became legend? Or is there another reason why evidence of giants never remains in the public eye for long? Giants as archetype or memory? Psychologists suggest that giants are archetypes, symbols of chaos and power. To the human imagination, they embody what is overwhelming, uncontainable, too vast for ordinary life. In this view, every culture invents giants, because every culture fears forces beyond its control. And yet, the consistency is unsettling. Why do myths from Ireland to India, from Norway to Nicaragua, describe not just large beings, but beings tied to the same details, born of unions between gods and mortals, consuming more than the world could sustain, violent, destructive, impossible to coexist with, destroyed in flood, fire or war but never fully forgotten? Why do the ruins align so closely with the myths? Why do sarcophagi, stones and skeletons whisper the same story the legends tell? Perhaps giants are both archetype and memory. Archetypes, because their presence embodies humanity's fear of what is larger than itself. Memory, because something like them may once have truly existed, the shadow that remains. Even if the giants were destroyed, myths insist they were not erased entirely. Some traditions claim their spirits survived as wandering demons, shadows unable to ascend to heaven or return to earth. Others suggest that remnants of their blood linger in hidden tribes, in secret lineages, in rulers who claim descent from the divine. The Anakim of Canaan, the Tuatha De Danann of Ireland, the Sons of Heaven remembered in China, the red-haired mummies of the Turin Basin. Each fragment suggests the same possibility, that the giants did not vanish completely, that their shadow still lingers, not only in stone and myth, but perhaps in us, between awe and fear. What strikes most deeply about the stories of giants is not just their presence, but their nature. They are almost never remembered as benevolent. They are not wise teachers or gentle guardians. Instead, they are violent, hungry, destructive. Their downfall is always necessary for humanity to flourish. And yet, their memory lingers not only in fear, but in awe. Their works, the stones they raised, the monuments they left, are remembered with wonder. Their very size, their power, left an impression so great that humanity could not let go. To this day, when we stand before the ruins of Baalbek, or stare at the massive walls of Sacsayhuaman, or walk among the silent statues of Easter Island, we cannot help but feel the echo of something larger, something beyond us. Giants as the border, perhaps the giants represent more than beings of flesh and blood. Perhaps they are the border itself, the threshold between the world before and the world after the flood. They are the embodiment of what could not survive, of what had to be erased for humanity to begin anew. And yet, by remembering them, we carry a piece of that lost world into our own. The giants may no longer walk among us, but their shadows remain, in myths, in ruins, in the restless unease we feel when the ground trembles, or when we find stones too heavy for human hands. In the fertile crescent between the Tigris and the Euphrates, where reeds swayed in the marshes and river silt built the world's first cities, the Sumerians pressed their words into clay. These wedge-shaped marks, called cuneiform, are among the oldest writing humanity possesses. And when we read them, we find not only records of trade or kingship, but memories of beings who were not human, beings they called the Anunnaki. The very name carries weight. Anu, meaning heaven, and Ki, meaning earth. The Anunnaki were, quite literally, those who descended from the heavens to the earth, beings who walked among men. To the Sumerians, the Anunnaki were not distant abstractions, not gods watching from the clouds. They were present, tangible, flesh and blood. They walked among kings, taught the arts of civilization, and shaped the destiny of humanity. In their texts, the sudden brilliance of Sumerian culture is not explained by slow invention, but by intervention. The Anunnaki are credited with agriculture, irrigation, astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, and kingship itself. The leap from scattered tribes to cities with laws, libraries, and temples seems abrupt, even to modern archaeologists. The Sumerians, however, had no doubt. They had been taught. The first city, Eridu, among the ruins of southern Iraq lies Eridu, which Sumerian tradition calls the first city. Archaeologists have uncovered temple foundations stacked layer upon layer, each built upon the last, stretching back thousands of years. In the tablets, Eridu is said to have been founded not by humans, but by the gods themselves. Its patron deity was Enki, one of the chief Anunnaki. Enki is remembered as a bringer of wisdom, cunning, and craft. He is the one who warns humanity of the coming flood, defying the council of gods. It is said that the Anunnaki first came to Eridu to extract resources, gold most of all. Ancient texts describe how the lesser gods, called the Igigi, were tasked with back-breaking labour, digging the earth for its treasures. When they rebelled against their overlords, a new solution was devised. Humanity, the creation of Adamo. One of the oldest myths tells that Enki proposed a bold plan to fashion a new race, a creature of clay and earth, but animated by the essence of the gods. In this way, labour would continue, but the divine would not be diminished. The texts describe rituals of mixing clay with the blood or essence of a god. From this act, humanity was born. The first man was called Adamu. The parallel to the biblical Adam is impossible to ignore. Both stories tell of a figure shaped from the dust of the earth, infused with divine breath or blood, set apart as the beginning of a race. Were these separate myths? Or were they fragments of the same ancient memory told in different tongues? The Anunnaki and the Watchers. The similarities between the Anunnaki of Sumer and the Watchers of Enoch are striking. Both are described as descending from the heavens. Both interfere with humanity, teaching forbidden knowledge. Both transgress boundaries by mingling with mortals, and in both traditions their actions lead to catastrophe, the flood that sweeps away the age they created. The Nephilim of Enoch, giants born of heavenly fathers and earthly mothers, find their mirror in the demigods and hybrid beings of Mesopotamian myth. Kings were often described as part divine, their extraordinary reigns stretching thousands of years. The pattern is the same, beings from above mingling with humanity, creating hybrids, elevating knowledge, and eventually bringing judgment. The Tablets of Kings. The Sumerian king list, etched into clay, offers a chronology unlike any other. It lists rulers who reigned for impossible spans, 30,000 years, even more. These long reigns continue until the line marked simply, then the flood swept over. After this dividing line, the reigns shorten dramatically, falling to human scales. To mainstream historians, these long numbers are exaggerations or symbolic. But to those who see myth as memory, they may hint at something else, lifespans of beings not entirely human. The Book of Genesis preserves a faint echo. Before the flood, patriarchs like Methuselah are said to live hundreds of years. Afterward, lifespans shorten, shrinking toward the ordinary, the echo of the same memory, that once beings lived longer, reigned longer, until the flood reshaped the order of the world. The rivalry of Enlil and Enki. Within the myths, a cosmic drama unfolds. Enki, Lord of Wisdom, is often portrayed as the benefactor of humanity, teaching arts, granting survival. His brother Enlil, however, is stern, wrathful, determined to maintain divine order. Enlil is the one who grows weary of human noise, who decrees the flood to silence them. It is Enki who secretly warns Atrahasis, guiding him to build a vessel and preserve life. Without him, humanity would have perished. This tension between benefactor and punisher mirrors themes found elsewhere. In the Book of Enoch, some angels intercede on humanity's behalf, while others demand judgment. In Greek myth, Prometheus defies Zeus to give fire to mortals, while Zeus punishes mankind for daring too much. Always there is division, some beings choosing to uplift humanity, others seeking to destroy it. The quest for gold. One detail of the Sumerian text stands out as peculiar: the Anunnaki's obsession with gold. Unlike other myths, where gods hunger for worship or sacrifice, the Anunnaki demand gold, mined, smelted, gathered. Some modern interpretations suggest a practical reason, that gold was essential for their survival, perhaps to repair a failing atmosphere on their distant world, Nibiru. Though speculative, the detail is unusual enough to provoke curiosity. Why gold, of all things? Even in our age, science has found that gold particles can shield against radiation and are used in space technology. Could the Sumerian scribes have preserved a fragment of truth about the needs of their gods? Nibiru, the wandering planet. Some interpreters of Mesopotamian texts speak of Nibiru, a celestial body with a vast orbit of 3,600 years. It was said to be the home of the Anunnaki, a world once green and beautiful, later desolate, its atmosphere failing. Whether Nibiru was truly meant as a planet or whether it is a modern projection onto ancient words is debated. But the myth remains compelling. Beings from a distant world, driven to Earth by necessity, mingling with humanity for their survival. To the Sumerians, this was not fantasy. To them, it was memory, carved into clay, passed down through centuries. Kingship descends. The Sumerians believed that kingship itself descended from heaven. Rulers were chosen by the gods, sometimes even infused with divine essence. This idea echoes across civilizations. Egyptian pharaohs claimed descent from Ra, the sun god. Chinese emperors styled themselves as sons of heaven. European dynasties whispered of bloodlines mingled with the divine. Could it all trace back to the same root? A belief, or perhaps a memory that rulers carried not only human blood, but the essence of beings who came before, the stones and the stars. When we look at Sumer's legacy, we find not only myths, but mathematics, astronomy and architecture. They mapped the heavens with astonishing precision, distinguishing planets from stars, recording cycles lasting thousands of years. They built ziggurats, stepped temples that reached skyward, like stairways between earth and heaven. The most famous, the ziggurat of Etemenanke, is believed to have inspired the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. Was it only pride that led humans to build towers to the sky? Or was it an attempt to replicate the structures of the gods, to reforge the bridge between worlds? Myth or memory? To dismiss the Anunnaki as myth is simple, but to look closely is to find parallels too persistent to ignore. Beings descending from the sky, teaching forbidden knowledge, mingling with mortals, producing hybrids, bringing judgment through flood. The Watchers of Enoch, the Nephilim, the Titans of Greece, the Jötnar of Norse myth, all seem to echo the same story. Perhaps they are different tongues telling the same memory, a memory of a time when humanity was not alone. The question that lingers: who were the Anunnaki? Gods, as the Sumerians believed, angels, as the Hebrews described, visitors from another world, as some modern theories suggest, or archetypes, symbolic embodiments of humanity's leap from ignorance to civilization. The clay tablets do not answer. They whisper, they describe, they recount, they hint, and in their silence they leave us to wonder. What is certain is this: the Sumerians did not see themselves as the sole authors of their own brilliance. They credited their rise to the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth, and if their memory holds even a fragment of truth, then our story is not only ours, it is shared. In every corner of the ancient world one pattern repeats. Rulers were never content to be merely human. They were kings, yes, but something more. Bridges between heaven and earth, bearers of divine essence, living proof that the blood of gods flowed in mortal veins. To us, it sounds like poetry, political theatre, the grand illusions of power. But what if it was more than symbolism? What if behind these claims lies a memory that once kings truly did descend from beings who were not wholly human? The Sumerian king list. In Mesopotamia, scribes etched into clay a chronology of rulers stretching back into unfathomable time. Known today as the Sumerian king list, it begins with words that still unsettle. Kingship descended from heaven. The earliest rulers are said to have reigned not for decades, but for tens of thousands of years. Alulim, the first king of Eridu, reigned for 2800 years. Alalgar, who followed, reigned for 36,000. One after another, the names are listed, each with reigns impossibly long. And then the line. Then the flood swept over. After this, reigns shrink dramatically. Kings live and die within spans we can recognize as human. To historians, these exaggerated numbers are myth, perhaps symbolic markers of ages. Yet to others, they hint at beings whose lifespans were not bound by mortal limits. They may be memories of a time when rulers were not entirely human, but semi-divine. The divine right of pharaohs. In Egypt, the pattern grows even clearer. The pharaoh was not only king, he was a god on earth, the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed son of the sky, and at death he became Osiris, ruler of the underworld. On temple walls, pharaohs are shown in the company of gods, receiving crowns directly from the hands of deities. Their very legitimacy depended not on human will, but on divine blood. Genealogies trace their line back to the gods of the first time, that golden age known as Zep Tepi, when deities walked openly among men. To be pharaoh was to carry that spark forward, to serve as a vessel of continuity between mortal Egypt and its divine founders. Even in their monuments, the message endures. The Great Pyramid itself, aligned with Orion and Sirius, whispers that the pharaoh was destined not merely for a throne, but for the stars. The sons of heaven. In China, emperors styled themselves as Tianzi, the sons of heaven. Their mandate, known as the Mandate of Heaven, was not simply political authority. It was cosmic legitimacy. Heaven itself had chosen them, and with that choice came the responsibility of harmony between earth and sky. If droughts, floods, or earthquakes shook the land, it was seen as a sign that the mandate had been lost. Here again, the ruler was never just man. He was the earthly vessel of a celestial power, the axis around which heaven and earth turned. Divine blood in the Americas, across the ocean in the temples of Mesoamerica, rulers proclaimed their descent from the gods. The Aztec Tlatoani traced his line back to the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, who had walked the earth to teach law, astronomy, and agriculture before vanishing across the sea. The Maya kings of Copan and Tikal performed bloodletting rituals to prove their divine essence, offering their own life force as a link to the gods. In the Andes, the Inca claimed descent from Inti, the sun god, and from Viracocha, the creator who rose from the waters after the flood. Their blood was said to be radiant with the power of the sun, setting them apart from ordinary men. Echoes in Europe. Even in Europe, far from the deserts of Mesopotamia or the temples of Mesoamerica, kings wrapped themselves in divine ancestry. The Merovingian dynasty of France was said to descend from a mysterious sea being who mingled with the royal line. Irish legends recall kings whose ancestry traced back to the luminous Tuatha De Danann, beings remembered as half divine and immortal. The Norse sagas proclaim that their kings descended from Odin himself, all-father of the gods. Everywhere, rulers cloak themselves in the same claim: we are not only human, we are more. Blood as memory. What if these claims were not empty? What if they were echoes of an older truth that once mortals mingled with beings who came from beyond? If the Watchers of Enoch, the Anunnaki of Sumer, the gods of Egypt and Greece truly walked the earth, then their unions with mortals would have left descendants. Dynasties would cling to this heritage, preserving their divine claim through ritual, symbol, and myth. This could explain the obsession with bloodlines. The purity of royal blood was guarded through careful marriage, often within the family. Pharaohs married sisters, Mayan kings took noble bloodlines as sacred, European dynasties interwove for centuries, all to keep alive a spark that was believed to be more than human. Perhaps in a way it was. The burden of longevity. Legends speak not only of divine ancestry but of extraordinary lifespans. The antediluvian kings of Sumer lived for thousands of years. Methuselah in Genesis lived for 969 years. In India, rishis were said to endure for ages, their wisdom stretching across cycles of time. After the flood, lifespans shortened dramatically. Kings still claim divine ancestry, but their reigns no longer stretch beyond measure. Humanity takes center stage, but only after a world of semi-divine rulers fades into memory. It is as though the flood did not merely cleanse the earth of corruption, but reset the balance of life itself, limiting what had once been boundless. Blood and power. To claim divine descent was not merely a matter of prestige, it was power. If kingship descended from heaven, then to challenge the king was to challenge heaven itself. Divine blood became the ultimate authority, the shield against rebellion, the reason why empires rose and fell by lineage. Even when monarchies collapsed, the echoes remained. In medieval Europe, kings ruled by divine right. Coronations were not political ceremonies, but sacred rituals, anointing rulers with holy oil as if sealing them with the essence of heaven. The belief persisted. To rule was not human ambition, but divine inheritance. Secret survival. Whispers linger that some of these lineages carried more than metaphor. The Book of Enoch hints that the spirits of the Nephilim survived the flood, lingering as wandering presences. Some traditions suggest their bloodlines persisted, hidden in plain sight, woven into dynasties, secret societies and priesthoods. In medieval legend, the Merovingians were rumoured to carry a spark of divine or even otherworldly ancestry. In Ireland, the descendants of the Tuatha De Danann were said to retreat into hidden realms, yet still influence mortal affairs. In the Middle East, traditions whisper of tribes descended from giants, still remembered with awe and fear. Whether symbolic or literal, the persistence of these stories suggests that humanity never fully let go of the idea that some families carried more than human blood. The thin veil. To stand before the ruins of Uruk, to walk the corridors of Luxor, to climb the steps of Teotihuacan, is to feel the weight of this belief. These were not simply palaces of men. They were thrones of beings who claimed to bridge heaven and earth. Perhaps the veil between divine and mortal was once thinner than it is now. Perhaps rulers did not simply imagine their divine ancestry. They remembered it. Perhaps their blood truly did carry echoes of those who came before, the Watchers, the Anunnaki, the gods of the first time, a legacy that lingers. Today, the idea of divine right has faded, replaced by democracy, republics, and secular rule. Yet the fascination with bloodlines remains. We trace ancestry with genetic tests, marvel at dynasties that span centuries, whisper about secret families who may carry hidden power. The myth persists because something within us remembers. It remembers that once, long ago, humanity walked not alone, but alongside beings who were larger, older, and stranger, and that through their mingling a spark was passed down. The kings of old claimed to bear it. The pharaohs built monuments to enshrine it. The emperors of China governed by it. The Inca, Maya, and Aztec drew their authority from it. The Merovingians whispered of it in secret. A legacy not of power alone, but of blood. Between heaven and earth, the semi-divine kings stand at the threshold of history and myth. They remind us that the story of humanity may not be one of pure evolution, but of mingling, of unions between heaven and earth, of dynasties that preserved something more than human. Whether the Anunnaki were gods, angels, or something beyond our categories, their presence lingers in the myths of kings. And through those myths, in the ruins, rituals, and bloodlines that shaped civilizations, they still whisper. Perhaps the rulers of old were not only symbols of power, but reminders of a forgotten truth. That humanity's destiny was never fully its own, but entwined with beings who came before. Across the myths of the world, there is always a battle. It is never simply a skirmish, never only the clash of tribes or kings. It is cosmic, apocalyptic, immense. On one side stand the gods, or beings of order, light, or law. On the other, beings vast and terrible. Giants, titans, monsters of primeval force. These wars are not remembered as ordinary struggles. They are said to have reshaped the earth, to have determined which beings would inherit the world. To study them is to glimpse the moment when one age gave way to another, when the giants of old fell and the age of humanity began. The Gigantomachy, war on Olympus. In Greece, the story is painted in marble, carved into the very stones of the Parthenon. The Gigantomachy, the battle between the Olympian gods and the giants, was a favourite theme of sculptors and poets. The giants are shown as towering figures, their feet serpent-tailed, their bodies immense, wielding clubs and rocks against the shining gods. They rise against Olympus, hurling mountains, shaking the heavens. But the gods prevail. Zeus wields his thunderbolt. Athena pierces the giant Enceladus. Poseidon crushes polybotes beneath an island. The giants fall, buried beneath mountains, their restless bodies said to cause earthquakes and eruptions. To the Greeks, this was more than story. It was cosmic order itself, the triumph of divine law over chaos, the setting of boundaries between mortal and immortal, between human and giant. The world could not be stable until the giants were gone. The Norse Ragnarok. In the frozen north, the sagas tell of a different war, one not yet finished, Ragnarok, the doom of the gods. Here, the giants are not merely enemies of the gods, they are their kin. The Aesir and the Jötnar share blood, sometimes intermarry, yet always stand opposed. Their conflict is inevitable, cyclical, written into the fabric of fate. At the end of days, the fire giant Surtur will rise from Muspelheim, wielding a flaming sword that will set the world ablaze. Loki will break free from his bonds, leading the giants and monstrous children of chaos, the wolf Fenrir, the serpent Jörmungandr, into battle. The gods themselves will fall, Odin swallowed by Fenrir, Thor poisoned by the serpent, Tyr slain by the hound Garm. The giants too will perish, and the world will be consumed by fire and flood, yet from the ashes a new world will rise, green and renewed. In this myth, the war between gods and giants is not only history, it is destiny. It is the eternal rhythm of creation and destruction. The biblical echo, David and Goliath. In the Hebrew scriptures, the giants take a different form. Flesh and blood warriors of immense size, descendants of the Nephilim. The most famous is Goliath of Gath, a giant who defies the armies of Israel. His armour gleams like bronze, his spear shaft like a weaver's beam. To ordinary soldiers, he is terror itself, an echo of the giants of old. Yet it is not another giant, not a warrior of equal size who defeats him. It is David, a shepherd boy armed with only a sling. One stone strikes, and the giant falls. This story is not only about courage. It is a parable of a new order. The time of giants is over. The time of men has begun. Divine favour no longer rests with beings of immense stature, but with mortals who place their trust in the unseen. The Irish Fomorians. In Ireland, the giants are remembered as the Fomorians, monstrous beings of the sea, one-eyed, one-armed, one-legged embodiments of chaos and destruction. They warred against the Tuatha De Danann, the shining race who brought agriculture, art and magic to the island. The Fomorians demanded tribute, harvests, livestock, even children, until the Tuatha rose in rebellion. At the Second Battle of Magtuird, the Fomorians clashed with the Tuatha in a war that shook the land. Baelor of the Evil Eye, the Fomorian king, wielded a gaze that killed all it fell upon. But he was slain by his grandson Lug, who struck his eye with a slingstone, echoing David and Goliath. Here again the pattern is clear, a monstrous giant destroyed by a smaller, cleverer hero. The passing of an old age into a new. Echoes in the Americas. The memory repeats even across oceans. Among the Hopi, stories tell of earlier worlds destroyed because giants and monsters had grown too violent, too greedy. In the Andes, the god Viracocha is said to have destroyed the race of giants with fire, for their violence had covered the earth. In Mexico, the Aztecs remembered that in the previous sun, giants inhabited the land. They were destroyed by catastrophe, leaving only bones to be found by later generations. Those bones, when uncovered, were shown to Spanish conquistadors, who marvelled at their size. Everywhere giants fall at the dawn of a new age. War as memory. Why this obsession with battles between gods and giants? Perhaps they are allegories. Gods as order, giants as chaos, mythic drama expressing the triumph of civilization over wildness. Yet the consistency across cultures suggests something more. Perhaps these stories preserve memory, not only of conflict, but of real beings who once walked the earth. If the Nephilim and Anunnaki mingled with mortals, if giants truly lived among men, then their downfall would have been violent, catastrophic. Wars fought between them, and the emerging age of humanity may have left scars too deep to forget. Buried beneath the earth. Many myths agree on one thing: the giants were not merely slain, they were buried. In Greece, Enceladus was trapped beneath Sicily, his struggles causing Mount Etna to erupt. Typhon, the monstrous giant, was imprisoned beneath another mountain. In Ireland, Baelor fell into the sea, his body forming the land itself. In Mesopotamia, the rebellious Anunnaki were chained in the abyss. The earth itself is said to hold them. Their restless movements felt in tremors, their breath in volcanic fire. The world we walk upon is not empty. It is the grave of giants, survivors in shadow, and yet myths also whisper of survivors. The Bible notes, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. Even after the flood, tribes like the Anakim and Rephaim persisted, dwelling in Canaan. In Norse myth, some Jötnar survive Ragnarok, inhabiting the New World. In Irish legend, echoes of the Fomorians linger, mingling into mortal bloodlines. Perhaps not all giants perished. Perhaps some retreated into remote lands, hidden valleys, or even other realms. In folklore, they linger as shadows. Giants in mountains, trolls in caves, beings half remembered by shepherds and wanderers. The end of an age. The wars between gods and giants are always more than battles. They are transitions. They mark the end of one order and the beginning of another. The giants represent an age of excess, of raw power, of unrestrained appetite. The gods, or their chosen heroes, represent the new age, an age of balance, law, humanity. For the world to continue, the giants must fall. Yet their memory lingers because humanity cannot quite forget them. Something in us recalls the time when beings of immense size and strength strode across the earth. Something in us remembers the wars that ended their reign. The whisper in the ruins. When we stand before colossal ruins, stones cut so large they defy explanation, we hear an echo of those wars. Perhaps they were built by giants, or for giants. Perhaps they were the fortresses of an age now lost. In the cracks of myths, in the buried bones of forgotten graves, in the trembling of the earth, the giants remain. Not as fairy tale figures, but as reminders of a border we once crossed, from the world before into the world of men. The wars between gods and giants are not just stories, they are thresholds. They remind us that we live in the aftermath of battles long forgotten, battles that shaped the earth, battles that may still echo in our blood. There are stones in this world so vast, so heavy, so perfectly set, that they seem to defy the limits of human strength. They sit silently beneath the sun, their edges sharp after thousands of years, their weight measured not in tons but in impossibilities. To stand before them is to feel a shiver, as though you're gazing at the remnants of a forgotten age, an age when beings larger, wiser, or stranger walked the earth. Baalbek, the Trilithon Stones. In the mountains of Lebanon lies the ancient site of Baalbek. Today its Roman temples rise proudly, columns stretching toward the sky. But beneath them lies something far older, something the Romans themselves built upon rather than created. At the foundation rests the trilithon, 3 stones each weighing nearly 800 tons, set side by side with such precision that a blade of grass cannot slip between them. Nearby lies the so-called Stone of the Pregnant Woman, an unfinished block weighing more than 1,000 tons, abandoned as if by workers who suddenly vanished. How are these stones cut, moved and placed? Modern cranes strain at far smaller loads. No pulleys, no ropes, no wooden rollers seem sufficient to explain them. The locals tell another story, that the platform was built by giants, or even by the first kings after the flood, men who carried within them the blood of gods. Some say it was Nimrod himself who commanded the construction, seeking to ascend to heaven as his tower once did. Standing before Baalbek, the imagination stirs. Perhaps it was not built by mortals at all, but inherited, its origins already ancient when Rome arrived. The Serapeum of Saqqara. In the sands of Egypt, beneath the necropolis of Saqqara, lies a labyrinth cut into solid bedrock. Within it rest enormous granite sarcophagi, each weighing more than 70 tons, carved with smooth precision and sharp corners as though shaped by machines. They are so large that even today transporting them would require specialized equipment, and yet they were placed deep within narrow tunnels, turned at sharp angles, as if moved by a force we do not understand. Mainstream archaeology tells us they were tombs for the sacred Apis bulls, but many lie empty, their interiors polished, their exteriors bearing no inscriptions. Why build such colossal containers, so perfect in their execution, only to leave them unused? To others, the Serapeum is less a tomb than a mystery. Perhaps it was built in remembrance of giants, or even to contain their remains. Perhaps it was part of an older system of knowledge, resonance, energy, geometry, preserved in stone when memory failed. Puma Punku, the impossible precision, high in the Andes of Bolivia, on the windswept plains near Lake Titicaca, lies the ruin of Puma Punku. The name means door of the puma, and its stones lie scattered like the bones of a fallen giant. Here are blocks of andesite and red sandstone cut with uncanny precision, straight edges, perfect right angles, interlocking shapes that fit together like pieces of a machine. Some are carved with intricate grooves and drilled holes, suggesting tools of incredible accuracy. Yet these stones weigh tens of tons, quarried miles away, transported without the wheel, and raised at an altitude of nearly 13,000 feet. The local Aymara people tell a story, that Puma Punku was built not by men, but by the god Viracocha, who rose from the waters after the flood. With a wave of his staff, he commanded the stones into place, raising temples overnight. Whether divine power or forgotten technology, Puma Punku whispers the same message as Baalbek. There was once a time when stone obeyed hands greater than ours. Göbekli Tepe, the first temple. In southeastern Turkey, buried beneath a hill for thousands of years, lies Göbekli Tepe, a site older than any city, older than agriculture, older than writing. Its circles of massive T-shaped pillars, some over 20 feet tall and weighing 20 tons, are carved with images of animals, lions, vultures, scorpions, foxes. The carvings are sharp, elegant, haunting. Archaeologists date the site to 10,000 BCE, long before humans were thought capable of such feats. According to conventional history, hunter-gatherers of that age lacked the tools, organization and knowledge to build monuments. And yet, here it is, a temple older than civilization itself. Even stranger, at some point the builders deliberately buried the site under thousands of tons of earth, as though to preserve it from a coming disaster, or to hide it from those who were not meant to see. Who built Göbekli Tepe? How did they know the alignments of the stars? Why did they carve symbols that repeat across the world? These questions linger like shadows in the stones. The Moai of Easter Island, on a small island in the Pacific, thousands of miles from any continent, the silent faces of the Moai stare across the horizon. These statues, some weighing 80 tons, were carved from volcanic rock and transported miles from the quarries. But most people do not realize that what we see above ground is only part of the whole. Many of the statues have bodies buried deep beneath the earth, some as tall as multi-story buildings. The Rapa Nui people say the Moai were imbued with mana, a spiritual force, and that they walked into place by themselves. Others whisper that they were raised by giants, or by those who came from across the sea in a forgotten age. To this day, no one fully understands how they were moved. The shared mystery. What connects Baalbek, the Serapeum, Puma Punku, Göbekli Tepe and the Moai is not only their scale, but their defiance of chronology. They appear at the dawn of civilizations, or even before. They are built with techniques that seem to leap ahead of their time, stones cut as though by machines, blocks moved as though gravity itself were tamed. And in nearly every case, local traditions attribute them not to ordinary men, but to gods, giants, or beings who came from elsewhere. It is as though humanity inherited these places, finding them already old, already sacred, and simply built upon them. Stones as time capsules. Perhaps these structures are more than temples or tombs. Perhaps they are time capsules, messages left in the only medium that endures. Stone does not decay like parchment. It does not burn like wood. It does not rust like metal. When all else falls, stone remains. If a civilization wished to leave a message across millennia, to whisper to a future world that once it existed, it would carve its memory into stone. And perhaps that is what these monuments are. Echoes of a forgotten world, survivors of cataclysm, testaments to a time when giants, gods, or their descendants walked the earth. The whisper in the stone. When you stand before these ruins, silence presses close. There is no sound but wind, no movement but shadows across the blocks. Yet you feel watched, as though the stones themselves are alive with memory. They are not ruins of men. They are remnants of something else, something beyond comprehension. Perhaps the builders were the Anunnaki, shaping platforms for their heavenly vessels. Perhaps they were the Nephilim, monuments of pride before the flood swept them away. Perhaps they were early humans, guided by hands unseen, given knowledge for reasons we may never know. The stones do not answer, they only whisper, a world before ours. Taken together, these sites suggest that the world before the flood was not empty, not primitive, but filled with marvels. A world of great cities and vast temples, of beings who commanded stone as easily as we command steel. When the waters came, most was lost, but fragments remained, scattered across deserts, islands, and mountains. Enough to remind us that our history is not the first, but one chapter in a longer story. Standing in the shadow. To stand in the shadow of Baalbek, to walk the halls of the Serapeum, to run your hand along the carved edges of Puma Punku, is to feel yourself small. It is to sense that humanity is not the first nor the greatest, but a child of something older. These are not monuments of ambition. They are monuments of memory, stones left as whispers, telling us that the earth has known more than we are taught. And so the question lingers, who built them, and what else have we forgotten? Knowledge is power. It shapes fire into warmth or into a weapon. It builds homes or machines of war. And in the oldest myths of humanity, knowledge is never neutral. It is dangerous, divine, and forbidden. Again and again, across cultures, we are told the same story. Humanity was given knowledge before its time. Knowledge from beings who came from beyond the natural order. Beings who should have watched in silence, yet chose instead to teach. The Watcher's descent. In the Book of Enoch the tale is laid bare. 200 Watchers descended to earth, led by their chiefs, Semyaza, Azazel, and others whose names still echo like thunder. They swore an oath on Mount Hermon, binding themselves together in their rebellion. They taught humans the arts of heaven and earth. Azazel taught the forging of swords and knives, shields and breastplates, weapons of war that transformed disputes into slaughter. Others taught the working of precious metals, the crafting of ornaments and jewellery, stirring vanity and greed. They taught enchantments and root cuttings, sorcery and the secrets of plants. They revealed the motions of the stars, the signs of the sun and moon, knowledge of calendars and omens. They taught women the art of cosmetics, painting faces, adorning eyes, knowledge that made beauty a weapon, desire a snare. What began as gifts soon became corruption. Humanity turned to violence, to lust, to war. The giants born of these unions consumed the harvests of men and turned against them, and the cries of the earth rose to heaven demanding judgment. The lesson of Enoch is stark. Knowledge given too soon can destroy. Prometheus and the fire. The Greeks told the same tale in another tongue. The Titan Prometheus loved humanity. He stole fire from the gods, hiding it in a hollow reed, and delivered it to mortals. With fire they could cook food, forge tools, and light the night. But fire also gave them the means to build weapons, to defy the gods. Zeus was enraged. Prometheus was bound in chains, nailed to a rock, his liver devoured daily by an eagle, only to regenerate each night. His punishment was eternal, for the crime of giving forbidden knowledge. The echo is unmistakable. The Watchers descended to teach, and were bound in the depths. Prometheus gave fire and was chained forever. The giver of knowledge is always punished, and humanity is always left to bear both the gift and its curse. The tree of knowledge. Even in the Garden of Eden, the story appears. Adam and Eve lived in innocence, walking with God in the cool of the evening. But there was one tree they were forbidden to touch, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the serpent whispered, promising wisdom, godlike vision. Eve tasted the fruit, Adam followed, and their eyes were opened. They knew shame, mortality, exile. They were cast out of Eden, barred from the tree of life. Knowledge brought awareness, but it also brought separation, toil, and death. Here again the pattern is clear. Knowledge is both gift and curse, both illumination and exile. Across the world, in India, the rishis were said to have received divine hymns, the Vedas, through direct vision. But those who misused sacred chants for selfish gain were destroyed by their own rituals. Among the Dogon people of Mali, the Nommo, beings from the star Sirius, descended to teach agriculture and weaving, astronomy and speech. But some versions say the Nommo's gifts brought strife, disrupting the harmony of the people. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl brought maize, writing and astronomy. Yet his rival Tezcatlipoca accused him of corruption, casting him into exile. Everywhere the same theme. Knowledge descends, humanity advances, but the gift is double-edged. Weapons of the gods. Some myths speak not only of knowledge, but of weapons beyond comprehension. In the Sanskrit epics of India, warriors wield astras, divine weapons granted by the gods. Arjuna receives arrows from Indra that unleash firestorms. Bhishma commands celestial weapons that rain down like meteors. The Mahabharata describes a weapon so terrible that it blinded and burned those who saw it, poisoned rivers, and caused women to miscarry. Descriptions eerily reminiscent of radiation. The weapon was said to be withdrawn, hidden away, for fear that humanity would misuse it. Were these only metaphors or memories of technologies now lost? The cosmic calendar. Another gift of the Watchers was knowledge of the stars. Enoch speaks of the angel Uriel showing him the courses of the sun and moon, the gates of heaven, the secrets of the calendar. In Sumer, the Anunnaki taught astronomy so precise that they distinguished planets from stars. The Mayan calendar tracked cycles lasting thousands of years, far beyond mere agricultural needs. Why would early peoples struggling to survive need such advanced knowledge of the heavens? Unless they inherited it from beings who came with it already in hand. Knowledge as temptation. In every version, the act of giving knowledge is framed as transgression. The Watchers broke their boundary, mingling with mortals. Prometheus defied Zeus. The serpent defied the command of God. Quetzalcoatl's gifts were met with betrayal. The Nommo brought wisdom but also discord. It is as though there is an unspoken law. Humanity must not advance too quickly. To receive knowledge without growth of spirit is to invite destruction, and yet the gifts could not be undone. Once fire burns, it cannot be unlearned. Once stars are charted, the heavens cannot be forgotten. Humanity is forever changed. The punishment of the givers. The givers of knowledge are always punished. The Watchers are bound in chains beneath the earth, awaiting judgment. Prometheus is nailed to his rock. The serpent is cursed to crawl upon its belly. Quetzalcoatl is cast out across the sea. Even in India, when sages misuse divine knowledge, they are burned by their own chants. It is as though the act of giving knowledge violates the cosmic order itself. Perhaps the higher powers feared that humanity, armed with secrets of heaven, would rival their creators. Perhaps the cycle of hubris and downfall was too familiar, too inevitable. Knowledge and catastrophe. The myths agree on one point. When knowledge is abused, catastrophe follows. In Enoch, weapons of war lead to bloodshed, giants devour the earth, and the flood is sent. In Greece, the fire of Prometheus leads to Pandora opening her jar, releasing all the evils of the world. In India, the misuse of divine weapons leads to devastation, leaving cities in ruins. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl's fall heralds war and sacrifice. Knowledge does not come gently, it comes with fire and flood, with exile and ruin, the ambivalence of memory, and yet humanity never renounces it. We keep the gifts, even when they burn us. We treasure fire, though it destroys forests. We polish gold and silver, though they incite greed. We study the stars, though their knowledge once brought judgment. We build weapons, though they threaten our own survival. The myths preserve this ambivalence. Knowledge is sacred and dangerous, divine and corrupting. It is the thread that lifts humanity from the dust, but it is also the spark that brings us near to destruction. The whisper that remains. Perhaps these myths are not warnings only, but memories, echoes of a time when humanity leapt forward too quickly, taught by beings who should have remained silent. Perhaps the great catastrophes that ended ancient ages were not accidents, but the price of forbidden gifts. The Watchers may be gone, chained in the abyss. Prometheus may remain bound to his rock, but the knowledge they gave remains in us. When we strike a match, we repeat Prometheus's theft. When we chart the stars, we recall Uriel's lessons. When we mine gold and forge weapons, we echo Azazel's teachings. When we paint our faces or adorn our bodies, we trace the lines of the Watcher's corruption. The gifts are here, alive, inseparable from what it means to be human. Between gift and curse, the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers is the paradox of humanity. Without it, we would still be children of the earth, living in shadows. With it, we have built civilizations, written poems, reached for the stars, and yet with it, we have also built weapons that could end us, machines that consume the very world we live upon. The myths do not give answers, they only remind us of the tension. Knowledge is never free. It always carries a cost, and perhaps deep within us we remember that cost. Perhaps our fear of apocalypse, our recurring dreams of flood and fire, are not fantasies of the future but memories of the past, when the first forbidden gifts brought both light and ruin. When the waters receded and the fires dimmed, the world stood silent. Forests lay drowned, mountains scarred, cities erased. Humanity staggered forward like a newborn, stripped of memory, naked beneath the sky. Yet the myths agree on one haunting point. Not all knowledge was lost. Fragments survived, carried by wanderers, sages, culture-bearers who appeared at the dawn of new ages. They came like shadows from a former world, guardians of memory, teachers of forgotten wisdom. The 7 sages of Sumer. In Mesopotamia they were called the Apkallu, 7 sages sent by the god Enki. Half fish, half man, they rose from the waters after the flood, cloaked in scales, their eyes gleaming with ancient knowledge. Each Apkallu brought a gift: writing, agriculture, architecture, music, law, ritual, astronomy. They taught the survivors how to build cities again, how to worship, how to order society. Stone tablets depict them standing beside kings, small compared to their towering forms guiding their hands. Statues buried in temple foundations show their bodies covered in scales, wings folded upon their backs, as if their very form whispered of another origin. Were they gods, angels, or remnants of an older hybrid race? The Sumerians did not question. To them these beings were the bridge between the drowned world before and the new age of men. The Saptarishi of India. In India the memory appears as the Saptarishi, the 7 rishis. When Manu, the first man, survived the flood by clinging to the horn of Vishnu's great fish, he was not left alone. The rishis endured with him, bearing the sacred Vedas, the hymns of creation. Each rishi is linked with a star in the constellation Ursa Major, the eternal 7 in the heavens, shining down as guardians of memory. They preserved the rituals, chants, and knowledge of cycles, ensuring that humanity would not begin again in darkness. Through countless yugas, the rishis return, reborn in each age to restore what has been forgotten. Thoth of Egypt. On the banks of the Nile, the figure of Thoth emerges, a god with the head of an ibis, patron of writing, wisdom, and the measurement of time. Egyptian tradition held that after the destruction of the first time, it was Thoth who restored order. He taught men to write, to count, to measure the stars. He recorded the names of the gods and the secret words of power. He became the scribe of the universe, ensuring that nothing was truly lost. The Greeks later identified him with Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes, whose writings formed the Hermetic tradition. To the Hermeticists, Hermes was no mere god but a sage, one who survived catastrophe and hid his wisdom in symbols, waiting for the age when humanity would be ready to understand. Even medieval alchemists whispered that their secret art came from the books of Thoth, hidden in the chambers of the pyramids, guarded by initiates who preserved them through millennia. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. In Mesoamerica, when chaos had destroyed earlier suns, the figure of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, appeared. He taught the survivors to plant maize, to build cities, to chart the heavens. He gave them calendars and laws, crafts and rituals. The Aztecs remembered him not only as a god, but as a man, a bearded figure, pale-skinned, who came across the sea. He ruled with wisdom, forbidding human sacrifice, until betrayed by his rival Tezcatlipoca. Cast down, he sailed away, promising to return. Even when the Spanish conquistadors arrived centuries later, some believed they were Quetzalcoatl's returning emissaries. So deep was the memory of the teacher who once guided them from ruin. Viracocha of the Andes. High in the Andes, the Inca remembered Viracocha, the great creator who rose from the waters after the flood. He walked among the people, tall and robed in white, staff in hand. He taught them to build stone cities, to farm terraces on the mountains, to worship with rites of balance. When his work was finished, he disappeared across the Pacific, striding upon the waves, never to return. Even today, his image lingers in stone, a solemn face with radiating beams carved upon the gateway of the sun at Tiwanaku. Oans and the Fishmen. The Babylonians told of Oans, a being who emerged each day from the Persian Gulf, half man, half fish. He did not eat, but spent the daylight hours among men, teaching them letters, numbers, laws, architecture, agriculture. At night, he returned to the sea. Later, others like him came, each bearing fragments of forgotten wisdom. They were said to be immortal, their memories stretching back to the age before the flood. Here again, we see the same figure, a teacher, half divine, emerging from the waters of catastrophe to guide humanity anew. Hermes Trismegistus and the Secret Books. As centuries passed, the memory of the sages became intertwined. Hermes of Greece, Thoth of Egypt, Enoch of Israel, all were said to be the same figure, clothed in different names. Legends told of books hidden in stone chambers, inscribed with wisdom too dangerous for common eyes. The Emerald Tablet, a cryptic fragment of Hermetic teaching, whispered, "As above, so below." Some said Hermes preserved the knowledge of the drowned world in the Great Pyramid, sealing it until a future age could unlock it. Others claimed that his writings passed secretly into the hands of the Gnostics, the Templars, the alchemists, each preserving a piece of the whole. The theme is constant. Knowledge was preserved, not lost, carried by hidden hands. The archetype of the teacher. Why do these figures appear everywhere? The Apkallu, the Saptarishi, Thoth, Hermes, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, Oans. Different names, different lands, yet the same role. They are culture bearers, survivors, the ones who step out of the shadows after catastrophe, carrying fire, writing, agriculture, astronomy. They arrive like ghosts of a world before, ensuring that humanity begins again, not in total darkness. Perhaps they are archetypes, symbols of our hope that wisdom survives even when everything else is destroyed. But perhaps they are more. Perhaps they are the memory of real beings, remnants of the Watchers, the Anunnaki, the gods and giants who came before. The preservation of memory. If the flood truly swept away an earlier world, then knowledge would have been as fragile as bone in water. To survive, it needed guardians, sages who carried it in their minds, symbols or hidden writings. And so the myths may be telling us something profound, that civilization did not begin from nothing, but from fragments preserved by those who endured. That we are not self-made, but heirs to survivors. The silent whispers of ruins. When you stand at Göbekli Tepe, or at Tiwanaku, or in the shadow of Egyptian temples, you sense their presence. The sages may be gone, their names confused by time, but their fingerprints remain. The alignments to stars, the sacred geometry, the laws encoded in stone, they are whispers of the ones who carried memory through the flood. They are time capsules, testaments of those who refused to let the world's wisdom vanish. Between myth and history, were the sages real beings, flesh and blood survivors? Or are they memories of secret societies, groups of humans who carried knowledge across cataclysm? Perhaps both are true. Perhaps the Apkallu, the Rishis, Thoth, Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha were remembered as gods because their wisdom seemed divine to those who had lost everything. Perhaps they were descendants of the Watchers, hybrid beings who survived the flood. Whatever their nature, their role is clear. They ensured continuity. They bridged the abyss between worlds. The whisper that lingers. Even now, the archetype of the sage persists. We imagine hidden masters, guardians of secret knowledge, keepers of wisdom in monasteries, libraries, or temples beneath the earth. We dream of being taught by them, of receiving fragments of truth that connect us to something larger. Perhaps this is not only imagination. Perhaps deep within our collective memory, we recall the time when such teachers did walk among us. When, in the silence after catastrophe, a figure stepped from the shadows and spoke words that would rebuild the world. Among all the names preserved in the fragments of ancient scripture, one stands out like a flickering star against the night. It is not the name of a king, a conqueror, or a priest. It is the name of a man who walked so closely with the divine that he became more than human. That name is Enoch, a shadow in Genesis. In the Hebrew Bible, his presence is brief, almost hidden. Genesis tells us only this: Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him. No description of his death, no tomb, no final words, simply he was taken. But in that silence lies a mystery that has haunted humanity for millennia. Why Enoch? What did he know? And where did he go? The Book of Enoch. The answers are found not in Genesis, but in a text long buried, long forgotten, the Book of Enoch. Here, the shadowed figure steps into the light. He is no longer a name in a genealogy, but a prophet, a scribe of heaven, the chosen witness of cosmic secrets. Enoch is taken on journeys beyond the world. Angels guide him through the heavens, showing him the motions of the stars, the treasuries of the winds, the storehouses of snow and hail. He is shown the places where the souls of the dead await judgment, the abyss where rebellious angels are chained, the throne of the Most High, radiant and terrible. Enoch becomes the messenger between heaven and earth, the one who records the fall of the Watchers, who pleads on behalf of humanity, who writes down visions too vast for mortal tongues. He is not simply a man, he is the bridge, the intercessor. When the Watchers descended, binding themselves to earth and taking wives from the daughters of men, their offspring, the Nephilim, spread violence and hunger across the land. The cries of humanity rose to heaven, and the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, looked upon the corruption and were troubled. But judgment required a witness, and so Enoch was chosen. He became the scribe who recorded the accusations, the petitions, the decrees. He stood between the Watchers and the throne of heaven, interceding, pleading, carrying messages across the abyss between mortal and divine. Enoch was more than prophet. He was mediator, voice, and scribe of eternity. The heavenly journeys. The visions described in the Book of Enoch are unlike anything else in ancient literature. They read not as parables, but as journeys. He is lifted into fiery chariots, carried by winds, surrounded by blazing light. He passes through gates of crystal and fire, into halls where walls are alive with lightning. He sees wheels within wheels, eyes upon wings, rivers of flame. He describes stars as living beings, angels as radiant yet terrifying, the cosmos as a vast order inscribed with law and pattern. He charts the paths of the sun and moon with precision, recording calendars and cycles far beyond what we would expect of his time. Some scholars dismiss these as poetic visions. Others suggest they echo shamanic journeys, trance states where the soul travels beyond the body. But to those who read with wonder, they may be records of something else, encounters with a reality beyond our comprehension, experiences with beings who walked between worlds. Enoch and the Great Pyramid. In Islamic tradition, Enoch is remembered as Idris, a prophet who lived before the flood. Some Arab chroniclers claim that Idris foresaw the coming catastrophe and built great monuments to preserve knowledge. They whispered that he inscribed wisdom into stone chambers. Some say the Great Pyramid itself, so that the flood would not erase all memory. If true, the pyramid is not only a tomb but a time capsule, a library of stone. A message from Enoch carved into eternal rock waiting for future ages to rediscover. Transformation. In the Book of Enoch, the prophet is not only shown visions, he is changed by them. He is clothed in garments of glory. His face shines like the sun. His body becomes flame, his eyes fire, his voice a storm. He is given wings, like the angels themselves. Enoch the mortal is gone. In his place stands Metatron, the lesser Yahweh, a being of fire and light who sits at the side of the throne. In later Jewish mysticism, Metatron is the scribe of heaven, the one who records all deeds of men, the keeper of secrets, the prince of the presence. From man to angel, from scribe to judge, Enoch becomes something in between. Not fully human, not fully divine, but both. The mirror in other traditions. The story of Enoch is not unique. Across the world we find echoes of mortals who are taken, transformed, lifted beyond death. In Greece, Orpheus descends into the underworld, returning with music that tames beasts and stones. In Mesopotamia, Etana, a shepherd king, is carried on the back of an eagle into the heavens. In Hindu tradition, sages like Vyasa are said to live through vast cycles, appearing at the dawn of each new age. In Egypt, the god Thoth, patron of writing, wisdom, and magic, is described in roles eerily similar to Enoch's. It is as though the archetype of the heavenly scribe, the mediator between gods and men, is universal. Enoch is one name among many. but the role remains constant. The silencing of Enoch. For early Christians, the Book of Enoch was revered. The Epistle of Jude quotes it directly. "Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment." But in time, the book was suppressed. It vanished from the canon, declared apocryphal, dangerous. For centuries it was lost to the Western world, preserved only in Ethiopia, where monks treasured it in Gaia's manuscripts. Why was it silenced? Perhaps because it revealed too much, that angels could fall, that humanity was shaped by beings from beyond, that giants once walked the earth. Perhaps because it placed too much power in the hands of a single mortal, a man who became more than man. The silence itself is telling. What is suppressed often hides truths too disruptive to accept. The legacy of Enoch. Enoch's story whispers to us still. It reminds us that the line between human and divine may not be fixed, that a mortal, walking in faith, can ascend to the heavens, that knowledge, even when forbidden, can transform. It suggests that humanity's history is not merely the story of dust and toil, but of encounters with beings from beyond, that among us, at times, there are chosen ones who carry messages across the veil. Enoch is the archetype of the bridge, the one who walked with God until he walked no more upon the earth, the one who vanished into fire and light, yet left his testimony in words that survive catastrophe. The whisper to night, and so, as night deepens, imagine him. A man walking among fields, his steps steady, his gaze lifted to the stars. The air shimmers, the sky opens, and he is gone, not in death, but in transformation. Imagine his pen upon parchment, his hand upon stone, recording visions too vast for language. Imagine him standing in halls of crystal, gazing upon wheels of fire, hearing voices that thunder like oceans. Imagine Enoch, the man between heaven and earth, whose story is not an ending but a reminder, that we too are always walking between dust and divinity, between the finite and the infinite. The sea keeps its secrets well. It rolls endlessly, erasing footprints, swallowing coastlines, hiding worlds beneath its waves. To look upon the ocean's surface is to see a mirror of the sky, vast, unknowable, filled with silence. And yet, across countless myths and whispers, there is the memory of something more, whole cities, even continents, drowned and lost. Of these, none is more haunting than Atlantis. Plato's story. The tale comes to us through the Greek philosopher Plato, writing in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He speaks of an ancient land beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we call the Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis, he says, was a mighty island, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. Its kings descended from Poseidon himself, god of the sea, and its people grew rich and powerful, building temples, palaces, and harbours. But with power came arrogance. The Atlanteans turned from wisdom to greed, from balance to conquest. They sought to dominate the world, raising armies and fleets to subdue nations. And so, the gods judged them. In a single day and night of calamity, earthquakes shook, waves rose, and the island sank into the sea, leaving only silence. Plato insists this was no mere myth. He claims the story was passed down from Egyptian priest to Solon, the Athenian lawgiver who brought it to Greece. To him, Atlantis was history, not fable, a universal memory. Whether true or not, the tale of Atlantis echoes across cultures. In India, the Mahabharata speaks of Dvaraka, the golden city of Krishna swallowed by the sea. In Polynesia, myths tell of Hawaii, a homeland that sank beneath the waves, remembered only in chants. In Celtic tradition, there is Wies, a magnificent city off the coast of Brittany, drowned for its pride and sin. In Japan, divers whisper of Yonaguni, a submerged city of stone terraces and stairways, discovered beneath the waves in 1986. Even in the Andes, the Lake Titicaca region preserves tales of cities lost to the waters, remembered as the dwelling place of Viracocha before the flood. Everywhere, the same story. Once there was a shining place, a cradle of wisdom, destroyed in cataclysm, leaving only ruins and memory. The temptation of Atlantis. For centuries, seekers have searched for Atlantis. Some place it in the Mediterranean, Crete and the Minoan civilization destroyed by volcanic eruption. Others look to the Azores, to the Caribbean, even to Antarctica, imagining it buried beneath ice. Theories abound, but perhaps the truth is less about geography than about memory. Atlantis may not have been a single island, but a symbol of many places lost to the rising seas at the end of the last ice age. When glaciers melted, coastlines drowned. Whole cities built upon fertile plains vanished. The memory of these floods could easily have become the legend of Atlantis, an archetype of loss carried across generations. The buried coasts. Modern science reveals that during the last ice age, sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than today. Vast areas that are now ocean floor were once dry land, fertile and habitable. The Doggerland region of northern Europe, now beneath the North Sea, once connected Britain to the continent, filled with rivers, forests and settlements. Rising seas drowned it, leaving only fishermen's nets to pull up bones and tools. In India, the Gulf of Cambay holds ruins submerged beneath silt, stone walls, artifacts, patterns suggesting cities far older than known civilizations. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni structures remain a riddle. Terraces, stairways and platforms lie beneath the waves carved from rock. Natural formations, some say, but the angles, the sharpness, the apparent staircases suggest something more. Perhaps the remnants of a city swallowed by the sea. If these are fragments of forgotten coasts, then Atlantis may be everywhere. 1,000 drowned cities beneath the waves. Lemuria and Mu. In the 19th century, new whispers arose. Some spoke of Lemuria, a lost continent in the Indian Ocean, home to an advanced people who perished when their land sank. Others told of Mu, a vast Pacific continent that stretched from Easter Island to Hawaii, leaving behind scattered islands as its only memory. Though these theories began in speculation, they too echo the same theme. There was once more land, more people, more knowledge than survives today. Whether literal or symbolic, they remind us that much of human history may lie beneath the waves, hidden beyond reach. Ruins that should not be. Divers exploring seas and lakes sometimes find what should not exist. Paved roads beneath the waters of Bimini and the Bahamas, said to be part of the Bimini Road. Stone circles beneath Lake Titicaca. Megalithic structures off Cuba's coast, lying in deep waters where no city should have been. These discoveries are often dismissed as natural formations or coincidences, yet they align with the old stories: Atlantis, Wise, Dvaraka, Mu, cities drowned when the waters rose. Perhaps the myths are not imagination, but distorted memory of real places erased by the sea. The symbol of Atlantis. Atlantis is more than a lost city. It is a symbol of the cycle of human history. A golden age rises filled with wisdom and power. Pride grows, arrogance spreads, balance is lost. Catastrophe strikes, flood, fire, quake, or wave. The city falls. The survivors carry fragments of memory into the new age, and so the cycle repeats. Atlantis is not only Plato's island, it is every civilization that rose and fell before ours. It is a mirror held up to remind us of our own fragility. Whispers from the deep. When the wind is still and the sea calm, it is easy to believe the surface hides nothing. But beneath lies a vast archive, a library of drowned plains and forgotten coasts. Somewhere beneath those waters may rest temples, homes, scripts carved into stone. Perhaps one day we will find them, or perhaps the sea will keep them forever, guarding the silence of ages. And yet, we already know enough to feel the truth, that humanity's story is not as young as we believe, that before Egypt, before Sumer, before recorded history there were others. Their cities glittered upon coasts now drowned. Their names are forgotten, but their memory lingers as Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. The sea's lullaby. As you close your eyes, imagine it. A city of shining marble, harbours filled with ships, temples adorned with gold, farmers in green valleys, scholars gazing at the stars, priests singing hymns to the sea god who protects them. Then the earth trembles, the sea rises, waves crash higher than mountains, sweeping streets, temples, palaces. In a single night, the world is gone. But the memory does not drown. It lingers in whispers, in Plato's words, in myths across continents. It lives in ruins glimpsed beneath the sea. It speaks in silence, reminding us that the ocean keeps what we forget. Atlantis is gone, and yet it is everywhere. Above us, the night sky unfolds like a scroll of endless mystery. Pinpricks of light shimmer in velvet darkness, forming patterns that have guided sailors, farmers, priests, and dreamers since the dawn of memory. But what if the stars are more than decoration? What if they are not merely lamps in the sky, but a map, an ancient code left to remind us of who we are and where we come from? The eternal watchers. Across cultures, the stars were not cold, lifeless fireballs. They were beings, watchers, gods, and guides. In Mesopotamia, the stars were the writing of heaven, each one a sign of the divine order. The Sumerians carved constellations into clay tablets more than 5,000 years ago, naming Orion, Pleiades, and Sirius. To the Egyptians, the stars were the souls of the blessed dead, sailing with Osiris through the night sky. The pharaoh himself, when entombed, was believed to ascend to Orion and Sirius, joining the gods in their celestial bark. The Dogon people of Mali tell of the Nommo, amphibious beings who descended from the star Sirius, teaching weaving, agriculture, and speech. Strangely, they spoke of Sirius not as one star, but as two, a detail modern astronomy confirmed only with telescopes. Everywhere, the stars are not passive, they are active, alive, carrying memory. Orion and the pyramids. On the Giza plateau, the pyramids rise from the desert like frozen suns. Their placement is precise, not random, not merely aesthetic. The three great pyramids align with the three stars of Orion's belt, Alnitak, Alnilam, Mintaka, slightly offset just as in the sky. Scholars debate whether this was intentional, but the precision is uncanny. Even more haunting, shafts inside the Great Pyramid point directly to Orion and Sirius, as though guiding the pharaoh's soul to join the gods in the heavens. Why Orion? In Egyptian myth, Orion was Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. To align with Orion was to align with eternity. The pharaoh's body rested in stone, but his soul was mapped to the stars. It is as if the pyramids themselves were not tombs but launch pads, celestial doorways, star maps carved into earth. The Pleiades, the seven sisters. Everywhere humanity looks, the Pleiades shimmer, a cluster of stars known as the Seven Sisters. To the Greeks, they were daughters of Atlas, pursued by Orion across the sky. To the Japanese, they were Subaru, unite. To the Maori of New Zealand, they were Matariki, heralds of the new year. To the Cherokee, they were seven boys who danced so hard they ascended into the heavens. In the Bible, Job speaks of the Pleiades as cords that bind the heavens together. Why do so many cultures remember them? Why are they always seven, even though the naked eye sees only six clearly? Some suggest humanity remembers a time when the seventh star shone brighter. Others whisper that the Pleiades are not only stars but a place of origin, that humanity itself descends from those who came from the cluster, and so we remember them instinctively, wherever we are. The calendar in the sky. Ancient peoples did not merely gaze at stars, they measured them, built their lives around them. The Mayans charted Venus with astonishing precision, recording its cycles over centuries, linking it to war, sacrifice, and prophecy. The Druids aligned Stonehenge with solstices, marking the longest and shortest days of the year with massive stones. In Chaco Canyon, the ancestral Puebloans carved a sundagger into rock. On solstices and equinoxes, sunlight-pierced spirals etched in stone with flawless accuracy. The Inca built Machu Picchu with sightlines to sacred peaks and solstice sunrises binding heaven and earth, and these were not random acts. They reveal a deep knowledge of astronomy encoded in architecture, lived in ritual. It is as though humanity once saw the sky as a book, each star a word, each cycle a sentence in a cosmic story. The Sirius mystery. Among all the stars, Sirius, the dog star, shines brightest. It appears in myths from Egypt to Africa, from Greece to Polynesia. To the Egyptians, the rising of Sirius marked the flooding of the Nile, the gift of life itself. They called it Sopdet, goddess of fertility, and linked it with Isis, consort of Osiris. But among the Dogon of Mali, Sirius carries an even stranger role. They speak of Sirius A and its hidden companion Sirius B, a dense, invisible star. Modern science confirmed the existence of Sirius B only in the 19th century with telescopes. Yet the Dogon claimed to know it centuries earlier, describing its orbit with uncanny accuracy. How could they know? Their answer is simple. They were told by beings who came from Sirius itself. Whether memory or myth, the Sirius mystery lingers like a star too bright to ignore. The cosmic teachers. Perhaps the stars were not only guides for farming or navigation. Perhaps they were reminders of origin. Many myths speak of teachers descending from the sky. The Anunnaki from heaven to earth. The watchers who left their stations to mingle with mortals. The Nommo from Sirius. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, often linked with Venus. The Apkallu, emerging from the waters after catastrophe, bearing wisdom. Their stories are always bound to the stars. Their descent is always from the heavens. Humanity, they suggest, did not rise alone, but was taught by beings who came from the constellations above. Monuments as mirrors. Why did ancient people build monuments aligned to Orion, Sirius, Pleiades, solstices, equinoxes? Perhaps they were not worshipping the stars but remembering. Perhaps the alignments are markers, maps, signals for future ages. Look up. You're not alone. Your origin is written above. When we gaze upon the pyramids, Stonehenge, Chaco Canyon, or the Nazca Lines, we are not just seeing architecture, we are seeing memory set in stone. Memory of the sky, memory of those who came from it. The sky is archive. Unlike scrolls or clay, the stars do not decay. They remain where they are, their cycles repeating for tens of thousands of years. Perhaps this is why knowledge was encoded in them. A star map cannot burn, cannot rot. Even if cities drown and temples crumble, the stars remain. And so, if an ancient civilization wished to preserve knowledge through catastrophe, they needed only to mark the heavens, build in alignment, etch calendars into stone, tie myths to constellations. Humanity, looking up, would always see the same map. Between earth and sky, as you lie beneath the night sky, consider this. The stars may be more than distant suns. They may be coordinates, reminders, whispers. They may be telling us, your story did not begin here. Look upward. The answer is above. Atlantis may be gone, cities drowned, temples buried. But the sky remains. The stars are our forgotten map. There is a thread in myth that chills the blood. It is the memory of weapons too powerful to belong to mortals. Weapons that shake the heavens, shatter mountains, and burn the earth. Everywhere, the gods wield them. Thunderbolts, flaming swords, beams of light, chariots that fly and roar. We call them myths. But what if they are memories, faded recollections of technologies now lost? Thunderbolts of Zeus. In Greece, the sky god Zeus wielded the thunderbolt. Forged by the Cyclops, it was said to be so bright it blinded, so loud it shook the heavens, so powerful it could annihilate giants in an instant. When Zeus hurled his bolt, it was not only lightning, it was judgment itself, the fire of heaven-made weapon. Mountains split, seas boiled, cities crumbled. The stories read like exaggerations, but one cannot help but wonder. Were they remembering lightning or something far more? A weapon that harnessed the very forces of nature. The hammer of Thor. In the frozen north, the god Thor wielded Mjolnir, his mighty hammer. With it he struck giants dead, shattered mountains, and called down thunder and lightning. Mjolnir always returned to his hand, never missed its mark. It was more than a tool of war. It was an instrument of cosmic order, defending gods and men against chaos. To the Norse, the sound of thunder was Thor's hammer striking. To us it echoes like a tale of a weapon beyond comprehension, a symbol of power that bends the laws of nature. Indra's Vajra. In India, the warrior god Indra carried the Vajra, a thunderbolt weapon said to be indestructible. With it he slew Vritra, the serpent of chaos, releasing the waters of the world. The Vajra was both lightning and diamond, both destructive and eternal. In later traditions, it became a symbol of spiritual power, the thunderbolt of enlightenment. But its earliest memory is of a weapon that could split mountains and command the sky. The Astras of the Mahabharata. Nowhere are divine weapons described more vividly than in the Mahabharata, India's epic of war and fate. The heroes are given astras, celestial weapons granted by gods. Each astra is invoked with a mantra, unleashed with devastating effect. The Agni-astra, weapon of fire, set armies ablaze. The Varunastra, weapon of water, drowned foes in torrents. The Vayavastra, weapon of wind, swept away battalions. The Brahmastra, weapon of Brahma himself, was said to unleash a firestorm that could destroy entire worlds. The descriptions are hauntingly familiar. Explosions so bright they blinded, heat so intense it scorched the earth, winds so strong they stripped trees from the ground, poisons that lingered long after battle. Some passages describe cities glowing at night, warriors incinerated, rivers drying up, unborn children harmed by unseen forces, images that recall radiation. Could the Mahabharata be preserving a memory of weapons more advanced than we can imagine? The flying Vimanas. In the same Sanskrit texts we hear of Vimanas, chariots of the gods that flew through the sky, powered by unknown forces. They were described as circular or pyramid-shaped, made of shining metals roaring like thunder. Some carried weapons of light, capable of striking cities from above. To modern ears they sound like machines, aircraft, even spacecraft. To the ancients they were divine vehicles, proof of godlike power. Fire from heaven. In the Bible, fire from heaven is a recurring theme. Sodom and Gomorrah are consumed in fire and brimstone, their cities turned to ash. The prophet Elijah calls down fire to consume his enemies. The Ark of the Covenant itself is described as radiating power so intense that those who touched it died. Was this fire merely metaphor? Or was it memory of a real force, a weapon or device that could channel energy beyond understanding? The sword of the archangels. In Enoch, the archangels are armed with swords of flame and light. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael. Each strikes down the watchers with weapons not of bronze or iron, but of fire, binding them in chains of lightning. In Genesis, the entrance to Eden is guarded by a flaming sword that turns every way, barring the path to the tree of life. These are not ordinary weapons. They are guardians of thresholds, powers that blaze like plasma, searing and eternal. Viracocha and the Andes. In the Andes, the god Viracocha is said to have destroyed the race of giants with fire from the heavens. He carried a staff of lightning, and with it struck down those who defied him. The Inca remembered him as a teacher, but also as a wielder of judgment, armed with light no mortal could withstand, weapons as memory of catastrophe. Perhaps these myths do not describe literal weapons, but memories of catastrophe. The thunderbolt may be lightning, the hammer earthquakes, the Vajra storms, the Astra's meteors. Humanity, struggling to understand forces of nature, clothed them in story. And yet, the specificity, the detail, the recurrence across cultures suggests something more. The ancients spoke not only of storms, but of devices forged, gifted, invoked. They remembered teachers who gave knowledge, and weapons too dangerous to hold. Perhaps, in ages now forgotten, there truly were weapons of fire, light and sound, lost in flood and fire, remembered only as the weapons of gods. The punishment of the givers. Just as forbidden knowledge brought punishment to the watchers, the weapons of the gods often led to ruin. Prometheus's fire unleashed Pandora's jar. The Brahmastra, once unleashed, threatened to annihilate the world. The thunderbolts of Zeus destroyed those who grew too arrogant. The fire of heaven wiped cities from the map. The lesson is always the same. Power too great for mortals must be controlled, punished, or hidden. Humanity may borrow the weapons of gods, but never wield them freely. The unease within us. Why do these stories feel so unsettling? Perhaps because they echo our own time. We too have weapons of fire that can level cities, poisons that linger in the air, machines that fly and strike from above. We too fear the destruction of worlds by the very technologies we created. The myths may be mirrors, reflections of an older cycle, a warning that humanity has walked this path before, wielded power it could not control, and paid the price in flood and fire. The whisper of fire. As you close your eyes, imagine the silence of ancient battlefields. Ash drifts on the wind, rivers run dry, the sky glows with fire. And in that silence, a whisper. These were the weapons of the gods, too bright for mortals, too fierce for earth. They came once, and the world burned. They may come again. Perhaps the stories are only myth, or perhaps they are memory, warning us across ages that to wield the fire of heaven is to risk becoming ashes ourselves. When fire and flood swept the world, when empires fell and libraries burned, not all memory was lost. Some knowledge was hidden, whispered from mouth to ear, encoded in symbols sealed in vaults beneath stone. It did not disappear. It went underground, and there, in the shadows of history, it was guarded by secret orders. Hermetic beginnings. At the root lies the name of a figure remembered across cultures, Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes. To the Greeks, he was Hermes, messenger of the gods, patron of wisdom and communication. To the Egyptians, he was Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe who measured the stars and recorded the names of the dead. Over centuries these figures merged into one, a sage who preserved the wisdom of the old world. The Hermetic writings, fragments like the Corpus Hermeticum and the cryptic Emerald Tablet, spoke in riddles of alchemy, divinity, and the unity of all things. As above so below, as within so without. To the initiated this was not metaphor. It was the blueprint of creation itself, the stars reflecting the soul, the body reflecting the cosmos. Hermeticism became the seedbed of Western esotericism. But even Hermetic texts whisper that they are fragments, remnants of a larger body of knowledge, hidden when the temples of Egypt fell. The Gnostics. In the first centuries after Christ, a movement known as Gnosticism arose. The Gnostics believed that the material world was a prison, crafted not by the true God but by a lesser power, the demiurge, who sought to keep humanity ignorant. Salvation came not through faith alone, but through gnosis, hidden knowledge. Their scriptures buried in jars in the sands of Nag Hammadi. speak of visions, cosmic hierarchies, and secrets passed from Jesus to his disciples in whispers. They saw themselves as keepers of a wisdom older than the Church, fragments of truth reaching back to Enoch, Hermes, and the Watchers. For their beliefs they were persecuted, their writings burned. But a few texts survived, unearthed centuries later, revealing a world where knowledge itself was salvation. The alchemists. In medieval Europe, whispers of hidden knowledge resurfaced in the form of alchemy. Alchemists spoke of turning lead into gold, but this was only a symbol. The true work was spiritual, the transformation of the soul, the discovery of the philosopher's stone, the elixir of immortality. Their symbols, serpents devouring themselves, suns and moons joined, crucibles and furnaces, were codes designed to hide secrets from the uninitiated. Where did their knowledge come from? Many traced it back to Hermes Trismegistus, claiming to preserve fragments of the Book of Thoth. Others saw themselves as heirs of Enoch, guardians of wisdom passed down through flood and fire. Even as kings mocked them and churches condemned them, they wrote in code, ensuring that their secrets could not be erased. The Templars. In the time of the Crusades, a new order rose, the Knights Templar. Officially, they were warrior monks, sworn to protect pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem. But rumours spread that beneath the Temple Mount, they discovered hidden treasures, scrolls, relics, perhaps even the Ark of the Covenant itself. Their sudden wealth and knowledge unsettled kings. They became bankers, builders, mystics. They carried symbols of two riders on one horse, of the cross within a circle, of temples aligned with the stars. When the French king moved against them, the Templars were arrested, tortured, and burned. Yet their secrets did not die. Some say they fled to Scotland, to Switzerland, to Portugal. Others whisper they became the seed of later orders, carrying hidden knowledge into new ages. The Rosicrucians. In the 17th century, manifestos appeared in Europe signed by an invisible brotherhood, the Rosicrucians. They spoke of a secret fraternity devoted to wisdom, alchemy, and the reformation of the world. They claimed descent from a founder who had travelled to the East, gathering fragments of ancient knowledge, then hiding them until the world was ready. Their symbol, the rose upon the cross, was a map of transformation, the blooming of hidden truth through sacrifice. Were they real? Were they allegory? No one knows. But their writings spread like wildfire, inspiring scientists, mystics, and philosophers alike. The Freemasons. And then came the most enduring of secret orders, the Freemasons. Born in the lodges of medieval stonemasons, they grew into a brotherhood that claimed to preserve the lost secrets of Solomon's temple. Their rituals, cloaked in allegory, speak of the search for hidden light, of a lost word, of geometry and architecture as sacred arts. Symbols abound, the square and compass, the all-seeing eye, the unfinished temple. Their degrees mirror ancient initiations, guiding initiates through death and rebirth, ignorance and illumination. Critics called them conspirators. Believers saw them as heirs of Hermetic, Gnostic, and Templar wisdom. Perhaps both were true. Threads that connect. Though separated by centuries, these orders share common themes. Hidden knowledge preserved through catastrophe. Symbols and allegory to conceal wisdom from the unready. Transformation, whether of soul or society, is the true goal. Continuity, tracing their origins back to an earlier age. Egypt, Babylon, Atlantis, the Watchers. It is as though they are fragments of the same broken vessel, each holding a shard of a greater truth. Why hide knowledge? Why not share openly? Why cloak wisdom in secrecy, symbols, and oaths? Perhaps because knowledge is power, and power corrupts. Perhaps because humanity, given too much too soon, has always fallen into ruin. Perhaps because some truths, about our origins, about the beings who shaped us, about the cycles of destruction and rebirth, are too disruptive to be told. Better then to whisper. To pass fragments from teacher to student, guarded by ritual, sealed by oath, to ensure survival, even if the world above forgets. The memory of fire. Whenever knowledge surfaces, catastrophe follows. The Watchers taught humanity metallurgy and enchantments, and the flood came. Prometheus gave fire, and Pandora opened her jar. The Templars rose to power, and kings struck them down. The Gnostics preserved hidden gospels, and their libraries were burned. The lesson is always the same. Forbidden knowledge survives only in the shadows. The whisper and symbols. Today, their legacy lingers in plain sight. The pyramid on a dollar bill, capped by the all-seeing eye. The rose entwined with the cross in esoteric writings. The Ouroboros serpent devouring itself, symbol of eternity. the square and compass carved into old lodges. To most, they are curiosities. To some, they are reminders that beneath the surface of history flows a hidden stream of wisdom, guarded by those who remember. The question that remains, did these orders truly preserve knowledge from before the flood? Did they inherit fragments from the Watchers, the Anunnaki, the sages who survived catastrophe? Or are they human inventions, symbols of our yearning for lost certainty? We may never know. But the persistence of these orders, their shared symbols, their whispered oaths, suggests a continuity deeper than chance. Perhaps in their rituals, their hidden texts, their guarded libraries, lies a faint echo of a world erased. A reminder that humanity has been here before, that wisdom has risen and fallen, that light survives even in the deepest shadows. The silent guardians. As you drift into sleep, imagine them. Monks in hidden chambers, copying texts by candlelight. Masons carving symbols into stone, each chisel stroke a prayer. Knights fleeing with secret scrolls beneath starlight. Alchemists writing in riddles, hiding truth in symbol. Whispers passing through centuries, hand to hand, voice to ear. Perhaps they are not myths. Perhaps they are the guardians of memory, carrying the ember of an ancient fire through the dark nights of history, ensuring it will not go out. Knowledge is the flame that lights the night, the spark that turns stone into tool, seed into harvest, word into scripture. It is the gift that raised humanity from dust. But in every myth, every whisper of forgotten ages, knowledge carries a shadow. It is never free. It is always dangerous. It is always cursed. The Garden of Eden. At the beginning of Genesis, humanity dwells in a garden of innocence. Adam and Eve walk with God, unclothed, unashamed, at peace. But in the garden stands a tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. One command is given, do not eat. The serpent tempts, Eve tastes, Adam follows. Their eyes are opened. They see their nakedness, their mortality. They are exiled. The way to the tree of life is barred by a flaming sword. Knowledge brings awareness, but awareness brings exile. The innocence of Eden cannot coexist with the curse of knowing. From the very start, the story of humanity is bound to the curse of knowledge. Prometheus's punishment. In Greece, the Titan Prometheus defies the will of Zeus. He steals fire from Olympus, hiding it in a reed, gifting it to humanity. Fire warms, cooks, protects, creates, but fire also burns, destroys, consumes. With fire comes civilization, but also war. Prometheus is bound in chains, his liver devoured daily by an eagle, forever regenerating, forever suffering. The price of giving knowledge is torment. And humanity? Humanity keeps the fire, but with it inherits the curse. The Watchers and their gifts. The Book of Enoch tells us the same in darker tones. The Watchers descend to earth, swearing their oath upon Mount Hermon. They teach men the forging of weapons, women the arts of adornment, priests the secrets of enchantments. They reveal astronomy, magic, root-cutting, the hidden sciences of heaven. With this knowledge comes corruption. The Nephilim devour the land, wars consume the people, and cries rise to heaven. The Watchers are bound in chains, buried in darkness until the day of judgment, but their gifts remain. Humanity inherits their knowledge, and with it the ruin it brings. The flood is reset. Again and again, myths tell us that catastrophe follows knowledge. The flood that swept the world was not punishment for ignorance, but for knowing too much, too soon. Humanity had eaten the fruit, taken the fire, forged the weapons, summoned the enchantments. The balance was broken. The flood was a cleansing, a reset. Knowledge had to be buried beneath water, scattered into ruins, preserved only in fragments carried by sages. It is as though the cosmos itself places boundaries. Too much knowledge, too fast, and the cycle must restart. The Tower of Babel. Another story, another warning. In the plains of Shinar, humanity speaks with one language. They build a tower, a ziggurat reaching to the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, they say. Let us reach the sky. But the Lord descends, confounds their speech, scatters them across the earth. The tower stands unfinished. Was it pride that angered heaven? Or was it the attempt to reclaim forbidden knowledge? Architecture aligned with the stars, gateways between heaven and earth, technologies inherited from the Watchers. Whatever the truth, the curse repeats. Knowledge invites judgment. Pandora's jar. The Greeks knew another tale. Pandora, the first woman, is given a jar filled with gifts from the gods. But curiosity leads her to open it. outpour sickness, toil, sorrow, death. Only hope remains trapped inside. The message is clear. Knowledge, curiosity, the desire to know what lies beyond the boundary, always releases more than humanity can control. The cycle of civilizations. Perhaps the curse is not myth but memory. Again and again, civilizations rise in brilliance fueled by knowledge. They chart the stars, carve stones with precision, build temples aligned to the heavens. And then, collapse. Sumer gives way to Babylon, Babylon to Persia, Egypt to Rome. The Maya, the Inca, the Khmer, all leave ruins of astonishing knowledge, then vanish. It is as if knowledge is always double-edged. It raises civilizations to greatness, but also plants the seeds of their fall. Knowledge without wisdom. The myths seem to draw a line between two things, knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is technique, power, ability. It can be given, stolen, forced. Wisdom is balance, humility, restraint. It must be earned, grown, lived. The Watchers gave knowledge, but not wisdom. Prometheus gave fire, but not humility. The serpent gave awareness, but not peace. And so, without wisdom, knowledge becomes curse. It is a blade without a sheath, a fire without control, a flood without banks. The hidden orders. Perhaps this is why secret orders guarded knowledge so carefully. The Hermeticists, the Gnostics, the Templars, the Freemasons, they encoded wisdom in symbols, rituals, and allegories. To give it freely, they feared, would invite catastrophe. But to bury it completely would be to lose it forever. So they passed it in whispers, in oaths, in hidden chambers. Knowledge is dangerous, but it is also necessary, and so it is rationed, hidden until humanity is ready. The modern echo. Even today we live under the curse of knowledge. We split the atom and created fire brighter than the sun. We unlocked the genome and toy with life itself. We build machines that think, algorithms that watch, weapons that can end worlds. Each discovery is both gift and curse. Medicine heals, but poisons spread. Technology connects, but also enslaves. Power grows, but so does peril. Perhaps this is why the myths linger. They whisper across time that we have been here before, that once, long ago, humanity reached too far, took too much, and was swept away. The whisper in the dark. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the flame of knowledge flickering in the dark. It warms, but it also burns. It lights the way, but it also blinds. The ancients called it forbidden, cursed, dangerous, and yet they never let it go. Neither have we. Perhaps the true curse of knowledge is that it cannot be forgotten. Once fire burns, once stars are charted, once weapons are forged, humanity can never return to innocence. We carry the curse because it is also the gift. We live in exile, but with fire in our hands. We walk beneath the sword, but with eyes open. The curse of knowledge is the story of being human. History is meant to be orderly. It is written in neat timelines marked by clean stages. Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, and so on. We are told that human progress was steady, predictable, linear, and yet, scattered across the earth are fragments that do not fit. Artifacts that whisper of technologies too advanced for their time. Bones that suggest beings of impossible size. Ruins that predate the civilizations we thought were first. They are the anomalies, pieces of a puzzle we are told not to assemble. The giant bones. In the 19th century, newspapers across America reported strange discoveries from burial mounds in the Midwest. Skeletons of enormous size, 8, 10, even 12 feet tall, were said to lie within. Skulls with double rows of teeth, femurs longer than an ordinary man. Farmers, digging foundations, claimed to find them. Explorers wrote of them. Yet again and again the remains disappeared. Some were said to have been taken by the Smithsonian, others locked away in private collections, others dismissed as hoaxes. In Asia, whispers tell of red-haired mummies in the Tarim Basin. Tall, long-limbed, preserved by desert sands, their origins unknown. In South America, legends speak of the Patagones, giants encountered by early explorers. In the Holy Land, tales persist of the Rephaim, the Anakim, tribes of great stature. Are these merely exaggerations, or do they preserve memory of the Nephilim, giants who once walked the earth, their bones now hidden or lost? The Baghdad Battery. In the 1930s, near Baghdad, a clay jar was unearthed. Inside lay a copper cylinder and an iron rod, corroded but unmistakable. When reconstructed, it functioned as a simple galvanic cell, what we would call a battery. Dated to nearly 2,000 years ago, it raises questions. What was it for? Did ancient peoples harness electricity for rituals, for plating gold, for purposes we have forgotten? Mainstream history shrugs, calling it curiosity. But the Baghdad battery whispers of knowledge misplaced, of sparks of technology centuries before their supposed invention. The Antikythera mechanism. In 1901, divers off the coast of Greece found the wreck of an ancient ship. Amid statues and amphorae lay a corroded mass of bronze gears. Decades later, X-rays revealed its secret. A complex mechanism of interlocking gears designed to track the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. It could predict eclipses, chart cycles, calculate with precision rivaling 18th century clocks. And yet it was built over 2,000 years ago. Nothing else like it appears in the historical record until a millennium later. It is as if the Antikythera mechanism is not invention, but survival, a fragment of older knowledge preserved, then lost again. The stone spheres of Costa Rica. Scattered through the jungles of Costa Rica lie hundreds of stone spheres, some small as a fist, others larger than a man. Perfectly round, polished smooth, their purpose unknown. Were they markers of stars, gateways aligned with constellations, symbols of cosmic order? No one knows. To the locals, they are reminders of a time when ancestors walked with gods. To archaeologists, they are anomalies, out of place, unexplained. Uparts, out-of-place artifacts. Here and there, whispers tell of objects that do not belong. A hammer encased in rock said to be hundreds of millions of years old. A spark plug-like device found in ancient stone. Metal spheres with grooves discovered in South African mines dated to billions of years. Skeptics dismiss them as curiosities, coincidences, hoaxes, yet their stories persist, unsettling the neat timeline of history. Perhaps they are fragments of forgotten ages, remnants of civilizations erased, evidence that we are not the first. The Nazca lines. Across the Peruvian desert stretch massive geoglyphs, lines carved into earth, forming birds, monkeys, spiders, and shapes so vast they can only be seen from the sky. Who made them and why? Some say they were offerings to gods, symbols seen from mountaintops. Others whisper they were landing markers, star maps etched upon the desert for beings who looked down from above. Whatever their purpose, they remind us of knowledge out of place, geometry, scale, and intention beyond the needs of simple farmers. The maps of old kings. In 1513, Admiral Piri Reis of the Ottoman Empire drew a map using sources he claimed were ancient. His chart depicted the coasts of South America, and even Antarctica, centuries before Europeans claimed to discover them, and long before Antarctica was officially sighted. How could such knowledge exist, unless fragments of older maps preserved from lost civilizations survived into later ages? Other maps, like the Orontius Phineus map, show rivers and mountains in Antarctica beneath the ice, features only confirmed by modern surveys. It is as though someone long ago charted the world with eyes from above. The great silence of archaeology. Why then are such anomalies ignored? Perhaps because they do not fit. The neat chronology of progress leaves no room for giants, batteries, machines, or maps of forgotten continents. To admit them is to admit that history is not linear, but cyclical, that civilizations rise and fall, leaving fragments scattered like shells upon the shore. And yet the anomalies remain. They whisper from museums, from jungles, from deserts, from the bottom of the sea. The memory in stone, every ruin, every artifact, every anomaly may be a fragment of a greater story. The Antikythera mechanism suggests advanced astronomy. The Baghdad battery suggests electricity. The Nazca line suggests aerial vision. The giant bones suggest beings who do not fit our scale. The maps suggest eyes that saw the world before ours. Each taken alone can be dismissed. Together they form a chorus, a murmur of memory from a forgotten age. What if? What if these anomalies are not outliers, but remnants? What if they are pieces of civilizations erased by catastrophe, their knowledge scattered, their monuments drowned? What if we are not the first, but merely the latest in a cycle of rising, falling, and forgetting? The myths say it plainly. Knowledge is given, abused, destroyed, preserved in fragments, and rediscovered. Perhaps these anomalies are the rediscovered fragments, clues left like breadcrumbs for us to follow. The uneasy silence. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the halls of a museum at night. The lights are dim, the crowd's gone, and in the glass cases lie objects that should not exist. A bronze gear 2,000 years ahead of its time. A clay jar that once sparked with electricity. a skull too large, a map too precise. They wait in silence, whispering of worlds erased. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you will hear their murmur, "We were here before you. We knew what you have forgotten, and what you will one day forget again." History, as we are taught, is a straight road. From caves to villages, from villages to cities, from cities to empires, a steady climb, upward and forward, with humanity always advancing. But the myths, the ruins, the anomalies, they whisper another story. Not a line, but a circle. Not progress, but cycles. Birth, rise, decay, and destruction, followed by renewal. The ages of man. In Greece, Hesiod spoke of 5 ages. The Golden Age, when men lived like gods, free of toil and sorrow. The Silver Age, when arrogance grew and men refused to honour the divine. The Bronze Age, an era of warriors, violent and strong. The Age of Heroes, when demigods strode the earth, fighting wars that shook kingdoms. And the Iron Age, Hesiod's own time, an age of toil, injustice, and decline. The story is not progress, but fall. Humanity moves not forward, but downward, from golden purity to iron corruption. The Yugas of India. In India, the cycles are measured more precisely. The Satya Yuga, or Age of Truth, when Dharma, the cosmic law, stands on 4 legs. Humanity lives in harmony, lifespans are vast, wisdom shines. The Treta Yuga, when Dharma weakens, greed rises, wars begin. The Dvapara Yuga, when virtue and vice balance, knowledge declines, disease spreads. The Kali Yuga, the present age, dark, corrupt, violent, an age of shadows. When the Kali Yuga ends, the cycle renews. A new Satya Yuga dawns and the wheel turns once more. The ages stretch across thousands of years, yet the pattern remains constant. Rise, fall, renewal. The Mayan suns. Across the ocean, the Maya measured time in suns, each representing a world age. The first sun ended in jaguars. The second sun ended in wind. The third sun ended in fire. The fourth sun ended in flood. We live now in the 5th sun, destined to end in catastrophe before a new one begins. The Aztec calendar stone carved in basalt shows the faces of these destroyed ages, each erased to make room for the next. The Norse Ragnarok. In the north, the sagas speak not of cycles of peace but of cycles of destruction. At the end of time, fire giants march, wolves devour the sun and moon, seas rise, gods and giants slay one another. The world burns, sinks, and dies. Yet from the ashes a new world emerges. Fields bloom again, survivors walk the land, a new sun rises. Ragnarok is both an ending and a beginning. The floods of memory. The Great Flood itself may be the clearest marker of cycles. The Sumerians, Babylonians, Hebrews, Indians, Greeks, Polynesians, all remember it. Not as myth alone, but as dividing line. The world before, erased, the world after, reborn. If one flood could wipe away civilizations, why not many? The melting of ice sheets, the rising of seas, the fire of comets or volcanoes, each age could end suddenly, leaving only fragments, myths, and survivors. The science of cycles. Even science suggests rhythms beneath history. Geologists speak of ice ages and interglacials, vast swings of climate reshaping continents. Astronomers note cycles of the sun, of cosmic impacts, of magnetic reversals. The Younger Dryas, a sudden cooling 12,800 years ago, coincides with extinctions and floods that echo in myth. Some suspect a comet strike, a fiery reset that ended one age and began another. History may not be steady progress but fragile, punctuated by catastrophe. Forgotten civilizations. If cycles are real, then humanity may not be the first advanced civilization. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe, older than farming, suggest knowledge carried from an earlier time. The myths of Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria whisper of worlds erased. The anomalies, the Antikythera mechanism, the Baghdad battery, the maps of old kings, hint at fragments of earlier brilliance. Perhaps each age rises, advances, grows arrogant, and falls. Survivors carry fragments of knowledge forward, enough to rebuild, but not enough to preserve the whole. We inherit ruins and myths, not blueprints. The eternal teachers. And so, after each catastrophe, teachers appear. The Apkallu of Sumer, the Saptarishi of India, Thoth in Egypt, Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, Viracocha in the Andes. Always 7, always wise, always bearers of memory. They are the bridges across cycles, the ones who ensure humanity does not begin again in total darkness. They carry sparks of the old world into the new. But even they cannot stop the wheel. They can only slow its turning, soften its fall. The curse of memory. What is perhaps most haunting is that humanity seems to know. Deep within, we carry an unease, a fear of endings. Our myths teem with apocalypses, floods, fires, wars of gods, stars falling from heaven. Our stories, even today, imagine worlds ending in plague, war, or storm. Perhaps these are not only fears of the future, but memories of the past, echoes of cycles that ended before, carried in our collective soul. Our own cycle. Where are we now in this great wheel? If Hesiod is right, we live in the Iron Age, corrupt and weary. If India is right, we are deep in the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. If the Maya are right, we live in the fifth sun, destined to end in catastrophe. If science is right, we live in an interglacial, a fragile warmth between ages of ice. Everywhere, the message is the same. This is not the first age, and it will not be the last. The whisper beneath history. As you drift into sleep, imagine the ruins beneath the sea, the bones beneath the soil, the stars aligned with temples. Imagine the sages carrying fragments of memory through flood and fire. Perhaps history is not a line at all. Perhaps it is a circle, turning endlessly, each age rising, falling, leaving whispers for the next. And perhaps we too will be whispers. Throughout history, kings and emperors have claimed more than earthly power. They claimed divine descent. They spoke not as mere rulers of men, but as heirs of gods, giants, and beings who once walked the earth. Perhaps this was only politics, a way to command obedience. But perhaps, hidden within the genealogies of royal houses, there lingers a deeper truth. Fragments of bloodlines that reach back to the forgotten ones. The Sumerian kings. The oldest king list begins with words of wonder. Kingship descended from heaven. The rulers of Sumer were not only men. Their reigns stretched thousands of years, as if time itself bent to their blood. Some names, Alulim, Alalgar, Enmenluana, echo like shadows. They ruled before the flood, in a world where gods mingled with mortals. After the flood, their reign shortened. The divine spark thinned, the human prevailed. But the idea endured. Kingship was not an invention of men, but a gift, a lineage, a legacy carried in blood. The pharaohs of Egypt. On the Nile, pharaohs claimed descent from Ra, the sun god, and from Osiris, lord of the dead. Each pharaoh was Horus in life, Osiris in death, his body mortal, his soul divine. His blood carried the memory of Zep Tepi, the first time when gods walked openly in Egypt. Marriage among siblings was not merely custom, but preservation. The divine blood was guarded, kept pure, never diluted with the ordinary. The monuments they built, the pyramids, the temples, the obelisks, were not only tributes of stone, they were anchors of memory, reminders that the pharaoh was not man alone, but descendant of the gods. The sons of heaven. In China, emperors styled themselves Tianzi, sons of heaven. Their right to rule was the mandate of heaven, a cosmic legitimacy that bound earth and sky. Dynasties rose and fell according to the purity of this connection. Though couched in philosophy, the belief was clear. The emperor's bloodline was not ordinary. He stood as axis between heaven and earth, his lineage infused with celestial order. The divine lineages of the Americas. Across the ocean, in the jungles of Mesoamerica, rulers also claimed descent from gods. The Maya kings traced their ancestry to divine serpents and celestial beings. Their rituals of bloodletting were not acts of cruelty, but renewal, releasing divine essence back into the cosmos. The Aztec Tlatoani claimed descent from Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who had once walked among men, bringing maize and knowledge. In the Andes, the Inca declared themselves children of Inti, the sun god, and of Viracocha, the great creator who rose from the waters. The Sapa Inca was the literal son of the sun, his golden mask not symbol, but declaration. The echo in Europe. Even in Europe, far from deserts and jungles, kings cloaked themselves in divine ancestry. The Norse sagas proclaimed rulers descended from Odin, the All-Father. Irish legends told of the Tuatha De Danann, shining beings of old, whose blood mingled with mortal kings. The Merovingians of France whispered of a mysterious sea being, the Kinotaur, who fathered their line. Medieval chroniclers hinted that their dynasty carried a spark not of earth alone. Even later, in medieval and early modern Europe, the divine right of kings endured. To challenge a king was to challenge God himself. The persistence of blood. Why this obsession with bloodlines? Perhaps it was political, an easy way to command obedience. But perhaps it carried a memory that once beings who were not fully human walked among us, and their children ruled as kings. If the Watchers took wives among the daughters of men, if the Nephilim strode the earth, if the Anunnaki mingled with mortals, then their descendants would have lived on. Dynasties would guard their blood, preserving their spark, carrying it through centuries. The obsession with purity. Throughout history, royal families guarded their bloodline fiercely. Pharaohs married sisters. European houses interwove endlessly. Dynasties collapsed from too much inbreeding. It was not mere pride, it was preservation. They believed their blood was sacred, their lineage divine. To dilute it was to lose legitimacy, to sever the thread that tied them to heaven. Even in myth, the idea persists. Arthur, the once and future king, is not only warrior but son of destiny, his blood linked with Avalon. Charlemagne, father of Europe, is remembered as chosen of God. In every case, blood is the seal of legitimacy, the Watcher's legacy. The Book of Enoch whispers that the spirits of the Nephilim lingered even after the flood. Their bodies perished, but their essence remained, roaming as shadows or preserved in bloodlines. Could it be that rulers who claimed divine descent were speaking literal truth? That their ancestry did stretch back to the Watchers, the Anunnaki, the giants of old? Perhaps this is why their reigns glowed with brilliance. Temples aligned to stars, monuments beyond comprehension. Wisdom too advanced for their time. Perhaps their blood carried memory, genetic whispers of those who came before. The hidden genealogies. Whispers persist of hidden records, genealogies guarded by secret societies, tracing royal lines back not merely to Adam or Noah, but to beings before the flood. The Merovingians, some claim, preserved bloodlines linked to Christ or to Nephilim. The Templars were said to guard such secrets, carrying them into exile. Freemasons traced their rituals to Solomon's temple, but some whispered of origins far older. In the East, dynasties preserved scrolls tracing their ancestry to heavenly visitors, to dragons, to beings who descended in fire. These stories may be allegory, or they may be memory, carefully hidden, too dangerous to reveal. Blood is key. If knowledge is cursed, perhaps blood is its safeguard. Knowledge can be written, stolen, burned. But blood carries memory in silence. DNA is a library, coded in flesh. If beings once mingled with mortals, their essence would be carried forward, silently shaping generations. Perhaps this is why rulers guarded bloodlines. Not for power alone, but for survival, for the preservation of something older, stranger, hidden in veins. The echo in us. Even now we are drawn to genealogy, to ancestry. We send our DNA to companies, eager to know where we come from. We trace our family trees, hoping to find kings, heroes, legends. Perhaps this longing is deeper than curiosity. Perhaps it is the faint memory that our blood carries more than human history, that within us may lie fragments of forgotten lineages, whispers of beings who walked before. The whisper tonight. As you drift towards sleep, imagine a king seated upon his throne, gold crown upon his brow, scepter in hand. To his people he is ruler by right of conquest. To himself he is more, heir of gods, descendant of giants, bearer of a spark not mortal. Imagine the blood that flows through his veins, warm, red, but carrying echoes of something older. Imagine dynasties weaving marriages, guarding secrets, preserving sparks across centuries. Perhaps it is all symbol, perhaps it is truth. Either way, the belief endures, that blood carries memory, that lineage is more than genealogy, that we are heirs not only of men, but of forgotten ones. Every story must end, yet endings are never final. They are thresholds, doorways that lead us not into silence, but into echo. And the story of humanity, our forgotten origins, our myths of gods and giants, our ruins and anomalies, is not a closed book. It is an echo that lingers, a whisper that will not die. The layers of memory. Imagine the earth as a vast palimpsest, a manuscript written and erased, then written again. Each age is a layer. Civilizations rise, carve their story into stone, then are swept away by flood, fire, or time. New hands write over the old, but the faint traces remain beneath. We live upon these layers, often blind to what lies below. Yet sometimes, in myths, ruins, or anomalies, the earlier writing bleeds through, reminding us that we are not the first. Perhaps we're only the latest line in a story that stretches back further than we dare imagine. The survivors' whispers, the Apkallu of Sumer, the Saptarishi of India, Thoth of Egypt, Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica, Viracocha in the Andes. Always, after catastrophe, the sages appear. Always they bring fragments of memory, knowledge of stars, agriculture, writing, architecture. They are not inventors, but preservers, survivors of an earlier age. Perhaps they were real. Perhaps they were symbols. But their role is clear, to carry the ember of the old world into the new. And so humanity never begins again in total darkness. Always we inherit whispers. Always echoes remain. The ruins that speak. Baalbek, where stones lie heavier than mountains. Puma Punku, where blocks fit with impossible precision. Göbekli Tepe, older than farming, older than cities, older than history itself. The Great Pyramid, aligned with stars, filled with secrets still hidden in its stone heart. These are not mere ruins, they are monuments of memory. They remind us that knowledge existed before we think it should have. They whisper that cycles have turned before and may turn again. The ruins are not silent. They speak in geometry, in alignment, in stone too vast for human hands alone. They are time capsules carrying fragments of a world erased. The bloodlines that endure. Kings and emperors claimed descent from gods, giants, and shining beings. Pharaohs guarded their bloodlines. Inca called themselves children of the sun. Emperors styled themselves sons of heaven. Perhaps these were only symbols, or perhaps they were memories of a mingling long ago, when the Watchers descended, when the Nephilim strode across the earth, when the Anunnaki ruled. If so, then even now, hidden within veins and genomes, the echo remains, not only in myths or ruins, but in flesh itself. The stars above, and always the stars, Orion's belt reflected in pyramids. The Pleiades remembered by every culture, 7 sisters shining above. Sirius, the dog star guiding floods linked with gods, whispered by the Dogon as a double star long before telescopes confirmed it. The stars are our forgotten map. They endure when floods erase coasts and fires consume cities. They remain as guides, markers, reminders. To look up is to look back, to see the same constellations that shone over Atlantis, over Sumer, over the first time. They whisper, your story is not only of earth, it is also of heaven. The curse and the gift. And then, the knowledge, always double-edged, always dangerous. The Watchers taught metallurgy, enchantments, cosmetics. Prometheus gave fire. The serpent offered the fruit of knowing. Each gift brought brilliance, and each brought ruin. Perhaps this is the curse of humanity. To know, yet never wisely enough. To learn, yet always at the risk of destruction. Our modern age is no different. We split the atom, harnessed the genome, built machines that think. We wield fire brighter than the sun, yet live under its shadow, knowing it could consume us. The curse persists, but so does the gift. Without it, we would not be human. The cycles turn. Flood myths, destruction myths, apocalypses, all remind us that the world has ended before and will end again. The Golden Age gives way to the Iron. The Satya Yuga fades into Kali. The suns of the Maya rise and fall. Ragnarok burns the world only for a new sun to dawn. We live in one cycle, but not the last. The wheel turns, and we with it. The echo within. Perhaps the strangest echo of all is the one inside us. In our fascination with myths, in our longing for hidden knowledge, in our fear of endings and our dream of golden beginnings, we carry the memory. Why do we tell stories of giants, gods, and floods across every culture? Why do we feel awe before ruins or unease before stars? Why do we whisper of secret bloodlines and hidden orders? Perhaps because deep within we remember. Not with words, but with instincts, with dreams, with echoes. The final whisper. As you drift towards sleep, imagine it. The ruins beneath the sea, the stars above, silent yet watching, the bloodlines carrying sparks of forgotten fire, the sages walking from flood to flood, carrying fragments of light. The cycle turns, civilizations rise, fall, and are forgotten. But echoes remain, in myths, in stones, in blood, in stars. And we too are part of the echo. We are not the first. We will not be the last. Our story is only one verse in a song sung across ages. Listen closely and you may hear it. The echo of the forgotten ones, reminding us that our history is not what we are told. It is deeper, older, stranger. An unfinished song carried by the earth, the sky, and by us.